You can only be as free as you're authentic to yourself. You can't spin up a fake person who can't do things that you say you can and lie and get by and live a good life in your own head. You can't do that. So everybody has the freedom to be honest about who they are and what they're good at and what they're bad at and have a plan for themselves. That's freedom already. And yeah, even if this goes into the gulag closed state system, those systems are riddled with people who still live authentic, interesting lives and did the right thing inside of the limitations of their lives.
This episode of the Free Cities podcast is brought to you by Veritas Village. Now, Veritas Village is an off-grid, self-sufficient place for people who are interested in living a normal, freedom-oriented life. You can reduce your reliance on corporations or government systems in your very own energy self-sufficient luxury home with its own water supply, located in a perfect climate to grow your own food. Communities use Bitcoin, and you can also buy your property with Bitcoin as well. www.ecovillages.life/free cities for more info. Please don't forget to mention the Free Cities podcast, and in the meantime, enjoy the conversation. Okay, nice one.
Cheers. Welcome back.
Thank you. I think I'm going to prelude this episode by saying, yes, you are looking every now and then at a picture of a cartoon character of a Ben Gunn. No, it's not the real Ben Gunn, obviously. It's not even your pseudonymous.
Yes.
I think it's fair to say. But interesting, though, because I quite like to talk about that. Because I've had that thought, obviously. I'm not, obviously.
No.
But in this day and age, why be even anonymous? I mean, when you think about it, right, what's it protecting you against? Because, number one, someone can identify you by your voice as easy as anything.
Absolutely.
You know. Number two, if I wanted to find out who you were, even if I'd never met, yeah, exactly. So what is the point of like hiding your face, just out of interest?
It's deciding what the principle is and defining it. So if it's privacy, then being pseudonymous is a means to that end, right? And if then you say, well, do I believe in privacy as a principle? And I think there's a lot of listeners who will, and they know that everybody else will say that. But then how do you express that? Because privacy, it's a little bit like hygiene, you know, in the sense that there's a good practice to not be outright dirty, which is to say you have curtains on your windows and you have a reasonable amount of privacy. But if you take it to an extreme and become Jason Bourne and dig in a hole and live in a Faraday cage, it's the same as someone who can't stop washing their hands. And it's got that same kind of profile where you never can do enough to be absolutely private, but you can do something in the middle proportionately to support the truth, the principle of it, which is privacy. And the idea of my maybe not being filmed or going to the other side and just being public is because I'm quite small scale, so it's not going to matter there's an element of what I'm doing that is not about me, so it's about the fact that anybody could do it, and so therefore I don't need to be part of it. And then there's this supporting a principle where just being a little bit private and a little bit more difficult to find and not so easy to graph helps people who really get the benefit of the use of that graph, where now they're having to be sorted through 10,000 people like me or 10 million people like me, and they're in that. And for people that do need to be private because their rights can't be enforced in the way mine are currently, then that's all to the good. And I don't want to be hidden or secretive, because that identity still carries a reputation, and so you can abstract that, and you can use that as a way to build trust with people. They don't need to know everything about you. It's what NOSTR's doing well, and you can build up essentially legal entities up on these NPubs now, and they don't need to be a real name because they might have a reputation that is abstracted from that.
But like, think in the future, right? How
Dangerous.
are we not going to interact with all that stuff? Like, and I'm thinking, like, I've just been to America, right? And it's different over there, even more. Well, it's definitely different from Wales, put it that way. You know, I got in a car and the whole thing lit up like a bloody Google services, this, that, and the other, cameras pointing at me, blah, blah, you know. Everywhere I went, I was being monitored, basically, in that world. And that's going to happen here. We know it. Especially, I think, cars. It's going to be very... I'm already, like on my old... You're the same, actually. On my old truck, I'm already paying more tax, more road tax than a normal car because it's old, right?
Yeah.
And that will keep going up, until I'm like, why am I paying so much?
Tax on the independence of that versus something that can be turned off, I think.
True. But what I'm saying is, how are we in the future going to stay anonymous? Like,
we're not.
We're not?
No.
So what do we do? Like, what do you do particularly? Because you really don't like being identified necessarily. Or it's not that you don't like being identified. It's like, I think I get the sense you just want to be annoying to some people that want to know who you are. You know what I mean? Like,
and that annoying part is a personal thing. It's not that I use an anonymous identity to be able to do that. I think that the schism you've got in Bitcoiner circles and freedom forums is that we do mix up secrecy and privacy. And privacy is just a level of dignity that you can have affairs inside of loops that are private, and you can express yourself in them in their proper context and reveal them selectively or not. And secrecy is where you are not visible to anybody for any reason, and yet want to still interact and go back out onto a social graph to do business or for someone to invest trust in you. And you're just like, you've got a paper bag on your head, and when that paper bag carries a reputation that you don't do what you say, you can take it off, throw it in the bin, and put a new bag on. And so I think people make mistakes when they mix up secrecy and privacy, where secrecy could be, it's a neutral good. It's a way to hide yourself. Now, that could be hide yourself so you can shoot somebody who you shouldn't be shooting, or it could be hiding because you're trying to hide from someone who's trying to shoot you. So to the degree that you can be hidden or revealed is just a technique, and it can be put towards good purposes and bad. Where the tug of war is going on is that we want the society trying to push for people to be visible, completely visible, and it takes the choice of that away completely. Sometimes that freedom can be used for bad, to collude, to plan and coordinate on things that are just evil, and they're the arguments made to reduce all freedoms. But we shouldn't be using freedom and the ability to express yourself privately or publicly as the way to throttle down on bad behaviour. It's the bad behaviour that's bad. And the means to find that bumps up against privacy. And people have a gut check when they hear that. They're like, right, so I've got to have an identity card now. But that's obviously not just going to shut down criminality. That's going to stay. And now we're just going to be identified for other reasons, like vaccines or extra taxes or a new level of regulation, or to track what you think or say based on your internet profile that's linked to an ID. So it's nefarious. And they use arguments, adjacent arguments, to open that door. And people can see that this is neutral. It can be used. Visibility is good. Total visibility is bad. And people need the control of that, and they need to have some level of personal dignity.
How, though, do you... I mean, let's face it, most people out there in the world, and I say out there because it feels like it's out there when you're here, doesn't it? It's nice. But most people out there in the world don't care and will just go along with it and be tracked and be this, be that. So it's almost like you've got these two lives. One where you're behind your walled garden or whatever. Citadel, yeah. And the other one when you go out in the world and you can't even be anonymous out there because you stand out by trying to be anonymous. So yeah. Is that where we're at? Is it like Citadels or nothing? Is it?
Yeah, the pressure is pushing it there, and it's making people have to decide. And I don't want to sound despondent, but yeah, the technology is fierce enough to sort of remove even the ethical side of the argument. If a government can cheaply deploy something that monitors you very closely, and there isn't enough will to press back on it as a population, it's going to be enforced. And I know that sounds terrible. I suppose you wait for whatever happens in that environment that doesn't happen healthily in a free society, and then they'll get the consequences of it afterwards. The problem is we're all carried along with our majorities, and it doesn't matter if there's 10 of you and 60 million other people. You can't enforce that with your own violence or with your own protect. You can't do that.
I mean, you're making the case for small independent jurisdictions with their own rules, right there. And I've always got to check myself because I often come back to that again and again and again, and it's like, because, and it's not just because this is the Free Cities podcast. It's because when you go down all the routes of the future, you discover this place where, like you say, technology will very cheaply monitor everything you do. Very cheaply. And even going in the future, there'll be tiny little nano drones flying around.
I don't know.
Or whatever. But even with what we can imagine, because it's already happening. If you go out into the real world, you have to try to not be tracked. It's not that you kind of like, that you have to make a concerted effort to not be tracked. So, and, within...
Not being trackable, it gets to a point where you're more visible, like you said. You're more visible by having no footprints than you are by having some that are obscured or along a lot of other footprints. And that's the level of conviction I have in my private identity. I could care less if I get quote unquote doxed or tracked down. It doesn't matter. I'm one hop away from finding out who I am because my work is out there facing the public, and I don't really care that much. But it's just small steps that make a bigger anonymity set for people who really need it, or people who might need it once. A sort of semi-obscured way to communicate, and I just hold it open for that. It's just a way to join a bigger group where some people in that group need to not be found or need to communicate in a context that isn't public and shouldn't be, and that's my part of it personally. But it's a complicated principle. It's complicated. And we've got to try and go into the middle of the two extremes, which is complete secrecy, where we cannot be sure of anything from a counterparty we need to do business with or live around. Because this is the other side of it for privacy people. Is like, don't think that that you can do what you want now because you've got a mask on. You can do what you want and then drop away, and you're in a different network. You just plug out like the Matrix, and you're not that guy anymore. Because it sounds good, but you're going to stay hidden, and people aren't going to see your values because you can't show them anywhere that's public. And you're going to be able to hide the bad aspects of you in a way other people can't see. So when we give up that visibility, at its extreme, the visibility is bad because people can take everything that you are on the digital map and turn it to, oh, look what he did there and look what he said there. But if you take it to the other extreme, where everybody doesn't have any record of the other person in their life, we can't build up a pattern of good and bad behaviour.
All right, then. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of your sort of like methods / theories is to use NOSTR as identity.
Yeah.
And okay, so in one sense, you're basically just a number. So you are kind of slightly private, and everything you do is based upon the connections you have with other people, so you can be vouched for very easily, even in an anonymous way. But the truth of that system even is, once you throw enough computer power at it, you can work out who's who and who's doing what and everything. So what's the what have we got to just do we just have to surrender to this idea that we're going to be found out everything we know?
I think this, without blowing the conversation up too much, we're at a time when there's a lot in the headlines, and sorry for the noise in the background.
Oh wait, we're at a working sawmill.
Yeah, so we'll
amongst
get
other things.
Background. But I was just going to say that it's a really uncertain world, and there's stuff going on in it that looks massive, and stuff that we cannot even control or influence. It's just borderline nuclear war, regional conflict, and all the rest of the misery. And it's very hard to just think and take it back to your individual life and try and work out, what should I be like on the privacy and what should I be doing? And under that, it's just very hard at the moment to make definitive decisions, and it isn't something that I've thought a lot about. I just had a avatar on Twitter from years ago and just enjoyed that kind of abstraction from me. but understood it was more important to a group than it was to me and the individual. And that's really where I fell out on privacy. But under what we're seeing in the world, I think it's one of those things. As long as it's not one of the two extremes, and as long as NOSTR can help, I don't know, record good behaviour, like an Uber score, and do it under certain rules. It doesn't need to enforce like black marks and nasty comments and things, but we do have to have some sort of decentralized review system and use these MPubs as entities. And they can be companies, or they could be groups, they could be guilds, private. And then using the same technology in Bitcoin, we can use that to control access to places, physical places or forums or connections with other people that goes by goodwill. And that's just a way that we can make things cheaper, because we don't have to interact with people who have got a record of not pulling through on what they said. It's where people wanted to put Bitcoin directly. They wanted Bitcoin to be the court of law. And, okay, you know, I can't see court cases going onto the time chain, onto the base layer. And I think NOSTR's just it's the Bitcoiner layer. And I think it'll come with accountability. And I think that's the square that the privacy absolutists, if there are people like that, is that, yeah, you've got a right to hide, and you've got a right to have some things that you keep to yourself, and that can be abused when they're given away. That's all obvious. But we've got to go more than that. If we go to the other extreme and just have total anonymous economic participants, they're going to realise costs by not knowing who they're dealing with. And that's a big loss. That's as much a loss as having zero privacy. So I just think that's how NOSTR is going to divide the difference and let you show a record of what you're best at, and let it be verified in different ways by other people. And it isn't that you have to have your whole life put up in spotlight, because obviously that's being used to coerce people and threaten them to make decisions and things, and introduce an opinion they have in one area to the detriment of their life in another. And it just chills everybody down. The same way that dealing with people who are completely secret would be, not knowing who the other person is. You only need to know enough to transact. If we're talking about capital allocation, we don't need to know everything about you, and I don't need to know what you were like at your worst moment. That's private. So we need the tech that can enforce that stuff that is just group agreed that you have no right to see. And if you do see it, we've got to be sensible enough to say that's taken out of context, because that was in a private group and you've just published it on a Daily Mail blog. Of course it's going to look terrible. You've taken it out of the way it was said, abstracted it, and curated it and put it somewhere else to set mischief. That's harder to do when you've got this NPub relay structure. And all it's going to take is more development to take it from social media clones like Twitter and the type of stuff we see on NOSTR, which is good, and develop it so that you can put more scale and weight and more economic significance on it. So we go from funny memes and zaps to prove the fact that we can swap content for money on a micro scale. But when you go up orders of magnitude in what we're trying to do, and we talk about free cities and circular economies and things, it's not 1 degree more difficult to do something that you'll have to do on a jurisdiction that wants taxes and things done to regulations and things. I'm trying to do something in the middle, and I'm trying to support these technologies as they come along and use them immediately when they are. So,
I mean, you, in a way, like, is this correct? I don't know. Is this public knowledge that you would like this place to be, like, to your ID to be verified by NOSTR to even come in and out? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. People know that, right?
Because it's not something I'd hide.
But it's but it's a good experiment, because it's
I've got to spend money in one place, right? And it's security. So you can't have. It's rural Wales, so it's not like downtown Baghdad. But you also sometimes lose your quad bikes, and sometimes you've got people on who are a nuisance who can visit because they can walk in the gate. And you could see them or not see them, but they've not booked an appointment. And the minute they're on ground that you're responsible for, you're sort of legally responsible for them. So you've got to buy a gate. And then you look at the tech, and you've all these different proprietary systems, £20 a month, and they do your NFC and da-da-da. But NOSTR's doing it alongside open source, and it's translatable into other use cases. So I might use NOSTR. I might say to you, right, use your NSEC, and I'll add you to a whitelist, and then you can just beep in with a sign-in device or something on this day. And then when that window closes, if you try and beep it, there's no one home. And that's a great use case. But that same NPub that does access control, under another use case, let's say we develop badges, and I say, right, it's cheaper for me to be a host to people who've got first aid training. Do I need to know where you did it? No. I need to see a badge associated to your NPub that says you've done first aid, and I need that badge to be issued by someone who's known and verified to do good first aid training. And they've said, right, you did a course with us, you're a good bloke, you didn't kick off, and you listened to what we'd said, and you've got a skill you didn't have. Stamp. And it makes the privileges I can give here cheap to give out. But if we did total secrecy, who are you, mate? Don't know you from Adam. Well, trust me. It's like, well, hang on a minute. We were doing trust a minute ago. And now we're going to go total maximal privacy where we don't know where anybody's from or what they do, or they can't show anything about themselves. That makes things expensive again to host. So NOSTR, if we develop on NOSTR for access control, we've got a NOSTR user that can use the other suite of tools in NOSTR along different use cases that are common to a site, this site and others. Like all around the world, someone will need, if they've got a location, they need to know who that other person is on their development. Now that's like, oh God, what, you've got an ID system on? Yeah, we've got an ID system so that it's not Chinese social credit score stuff. It's identification. I suppose that's the middle of these two extremes, is that you don't want to be over-identified, where your entire transcript of your life is stood up in lights against its purpose. And you don't want to be a complete black hat, because you can't get anywhere. You'd always be meeting an interaction at someone else's maximum defensiveness, right? So, you all right?
Yeah, sorry, that's flashing. Never seen that flash before.
As long as I'm not flashing.
We were talking about NOSTR identity, and you said, this isn't a kind of Chinese style, governance system, right? Blah blah blah. But right, it's not that dissimilar to it.
No,
it's not that dissimilar to it, right?
It's not.
Now check this out, because I had this really interesting conversation in America about a few months ago with this guy, Ian Underwood, his name was. He's a libertarian in New Hampshire, lives out on a homestead in the middle of the woods. It's amazing. You'd love it out there. And he told me about this new way of governing that he thought no one had sort of like mentioned before. And it's quite incredible. And it's actually probably the way forward. But when we were talking about it, I noticed the same thing that we are just thinking about there, is that, oh shit, this is quite near the social credit system. I'll give you an example. His idea was you have everyone basically decides. He said this is a cure for the democratic system, which basically means like you vote for
mob rule.
You vote for the difference. You vote for someone, and half the people lose out. Why don't you turn it back the other way? Why don't you say you can decide what you want to vote, but not geographically? You vote. So if you want to say you believe in free healthcare, right? So you just assign yourself to that party, and you pay into that party for free healthcare, but you don't do it geographically. You do one country.
It's a good way to. It's like a rhetorical way of understanding two things better, but it's not a viable way to run an area.
No, but you could do it. Like follow it.
Because I'll tell you why. Sorry, I'll tell you why. Because the people that sign up for free healthcare don't pay for it. Yeah,
I know, but that's the thing. It would be a free market in governance. So those kind of ideas would disappear.
Yeah, but they're not voting because they have the choice to buy healthcare or not.
No,
and they just want the principle. They're voting because they get it for free if they vote, and they don't get it.
But the point is, if you really are, say you're in America, if you're really a Democrat and you really believe in free healthcare, for example, you're willing to pay into the system. So you don't. But now you don't vote to get your guy in and force everyone to pay into the system. You just get all the Democrats to pay into the system, and they basically identify themselves, because it's very easy now. So you don't need a geographical boundary to your your political sphere.
No, the democratic model works by setting the majority against minorities in turn.
Yeah, we're not doing a democratic model here. We're doing everyone. So everyone has an identity.
How do you
so you have an identity. Say you have a NOSTR identity, and in that identity, you say what you believe in and what you're prepared to do. And if you go against that, so say in your identity it says I will not steal. If you steal, then you get punished. If you don't steal, everything's fine. If you believe in free healthcare because you want free healthcare at some point, then you say, yeah, I'm willing to pay into that system. And you're like, cool. So you agree to those ideas, but you might be dispersed amongst your neighbour over there, may not. He's like, no, I don't actually want to pay into that system. Yeah. And everyone has a unique ID, which basically carries with it what they believe in and what they want to do and how they want to operate in the world, and everyone gets what they want, basically. No. Why?
Because the people that want free healthcare can't afford to deliver free healthcare even to themselves, let alone to the majority.
Yeah, but wouldn't theoretically there be enough people that believe in it?
No.
Right. In that case, free healthcare is not a good idea.
Correct.
Right. Exactly. But that's a good system.
But we're not here because it's the best idea. We're here because it's the easiest enforced. You can abstract 80% of your rights you're born with into a voting box for a 4-year renewable promise to be treated well when you're ill, and they go for it.
Or you could invest some money wisely as an individual, and you would have enough money to pay for your healthcare yourself.
No,
but I mean, like, you could do that if you wanted to.
Yeah, but then that incentive to invest is taken away from your taxes, which pay. So you're charged to win, and you're given 100% of the right to lose.
But in this system, taxes are almost non-existent because you can choose whether or not you pay them. Like, you can be someone. All you have to pay for is the upkeep of the system, because the system is basically very cheap to upkeep. It doesn't need a huge amount of bureaucracy.
You have to pay for the cost of defending that from a next door state or next door town that are like, well, that's not going to work for us, so why don't we just go and brass them up? Right,
but that might be the one thing you pay for.
Well, that's what you pay for in government. It's a set menu. Your healthcare and stuff, that's like political preference. But what you're really connected to is the peace of mind you're not being invaded right now.
Right, but when you look at it,
and when you pay for that, it can enforce all of the other things that majorities want in that.
Yeah, but I agree. You might want to pay for that one thing, which is the protection of private property in a way, or rights, some kind of rights that you deem are rights. The rest of it is a choice. Like the healthcare, the schools, the funding of schools, the this, that. The rest of it's a choice. And it's as a free market, what should transpire over the long term is quite a properly kind of democratic, so far.
You're talking about a partnership, like an old-fashioned equity partnership, where votes are done to form consensus, but they're prorated against your stake in whatever your entity's voting on. So, old Goldman Sachs, old banks, 20 partners, each, let's say, each has 5% stake, and their votes represent 5 in every 100 votes on a particular issue, and then it's done on majority there. Well, that's a fairer form of majority because it's not nominal, like just a show of hands who thinks that we should burn the teachers and not pay them anything and give the money to the police. Like that's a different format than all the partners having equity and long-term upside in that system. We're breaking here because people aren't brave enough or intelligent enough perhaps to understand that this way of getting things done is terrible.
As in the democratic system.
The democratic system and the way it's funded and the purposes it's turned to, often to them. I just think we're in a very low courage, very low confrontational mindset.
Take your idea of using NOSTR to be an identity and finding a middle ground then in it where you're private enough, but not too private.
Yeah.
When that scales, say for some reason it scales. Say it's not just a bunch of, well, maybe you think it is. Do you think it'll scale?
I think it'll definitely have to scale because it's got the lowest route to. You've got a right to use it without any requirements. So, and the other thing is it's not mutually exclusive. You're not saying, right, pick up NOSTR and burn your passport. This is an extra sort of form of membership, sort of a form of a LinkedIn, and you get an Uber score and you live and die on your reputation. And it's okay to record that as long as it's pre-agreed. And NOSTR's open. You don't have to associate any activity to your NOSTR profile. If you want to post cats and get zapped and have a bit of fun and just show a tiny little bit of yourself, just a couple of funny posts, it doesn't have to be anything to do with you. That's one end pub. But what about the one where you're a plumber? Do you want to have a secret plumber who's got a type of work that could manifest itself as poor in 6 months or more? No, I want to go on Google. I want to search by average review on Amazon. I want to speak to people. I want anecdotal evidence. I want to hear both sides of a blow up, and I've got to decide, like, how much risk do I put on that counterparty? And this is a way to show the aspects of your character that you want to market or show in these subsets of groups or into the public on a broad relay, or in a group within NOSTR where you sort of have an access to it and you can make comments and do activity in the context of that private group. That's exciting because it's not that hard to do as far as code, and it hacks quite a lot of Bitcoin's technology except proof of work and finite supply, and it keeps the encryption side, and we can build quite a lot on that. I mean, I'm talking about utilities for real economy.
And the only difference between that and a social credit system is it's decentralized.
It's decentralized. It's peer-to-peer as opposed to hub and spoke, where the central panopticon maintainer of the database that sits, under Westminster or under Washington or wherever, and they just make pseudo admin changes to who you are based on the situation as it changes and what you think of it. And you don't get to choose what's being recorded. Like, that's another big thing, isn't it? Like on NOSTR, you could have a setting, you could have different accounts, and it's like, don't track my location. Whereas what they want is the all or nothing. They want, right, your digital ID, anything but up to about basically a tattoo on your head, so you can be recognised wherever you are. And once you're in your own front door, it doesn't stop there, because it's Ring doorbells and it's Alexas and it's all mapped, and that's what they want, and they'll take it because they can, because no one else is going to fight back on it.
So basically, it will arise inevitably in the same way that decentralized money is inevitable.
Inevitable, because it's
so
the cheapest
decentralized
to deliver.
Identity is inevitable.
Yes, it's the cheapest to deliver on the problem of transacting with other people without the centralized court and without the social credit system. What's the cheapest to deliver way for you to reveal an aspect of yourself that can't be forged, that lets someone else make a decision to take risk with you, or for you to take risk with them? And then you're into commerce. You're into contracts and bills of credit. And you can build NPubs up with transcripts of quasi-public. So we did a contract. Did you get to see the price of it? No. Did you get to see the nature of a contract? Yes. And can you see what both parties said about it? Very similar like to a peer-to-peer Bitcoin exchange. If you were to go on one of the big ones like Peach, don't know if that's big or not, but Peach. It's a nice one.
Yeah,
Hodl, Bisq. They all have reputation systems. They have to, because it makes things so precipitously cheaper if you prove that you do that side of an escrow consistently and you don't push things into the grievance, the mediation or the governance system of swapping money. So you just extend that into social interactions and into certifications. For instance, for people, you can demonstrate a competence or a capability, something you're good at, something you're professionally good at, hobbyist. And it's a combination of badges to confirm certifications, which is just a decentralized same way that you get university degrees and qualifications for adventure training and stuff like that. You just do it on NOSTR with badges.
Isn't, though, the centralized version more efficient? Because it's as in, more efficient, basically. Yeah. In a way, it depends what you're
It depends, like,
efficienting for. I mean, if it's
well, let's look at an efficient hub and spoke identity system, because I have a small background in diving, in scuba diving, and look, these plastic cards that come out in the mail from Paddy and from these, they're great until you dive with a Chinese guy who's got fewer dives in his logbook than the minimum entry requirements for the badge he's got to get on the boat. It can't manage its buoyancy. And then it's not efficient then. And the way that NOSTR improves on that is that it's a matter of fidelity. You can go an extra step with NOSTR and prove, not perfectly, but prove well that something went down the way it went down. And peer-to-peer keeps that more honest than a hub and the hub and spoke thing. Oh yeah, we've got some certification mill problems. Yeah, you've got people double spending your certification stamp, and the quality of that to the people who get the cost of it, which is the introduced scuba instructor or guide, have to roll the dice to the degree that cert could be milled or it could be not quite legit in the dive that you're taking your life to take people out onto the ocean on. And I imagine that'll be the same with welding qualifications and structural engineering and all sorts of things that are issued out of a tower that still have a low fidelity compared to just proof of work and progress and transcript and doing things by practice. And we can record all that on NOSTR. And it's going to sit wrong on people because some people are like, I'm not going to show myself on there. I'm not going to show. And it's like, hang on a minute then. Because you get to keep the choice and you won't show any part of you that will stand up to scrutiny in any community, small or big. Maybe you're not as good as you say you are. There's, maybe you're just going from group to group and emptying pockets or telling fibs and then moving on like a gypsy. And you're getting away with it because it's the downside of a privacy argument which can be turned left into total secrecy or right into total visibility. And the issue in the middle is identity. So we capture them bits that we get the benefit of identifying another person. And we take it out of that low-end scale of friends and, that sort of informal way to identify somebody and try and extend it so I can get a good impression of somebody at distance, that I can make a reasonable decision to interact with them and have an expectation. That's going to make things cheap, and it's going to mean we can do things at bigger scale of economy than we do at the moment, like hackathon, blog post, one-man band, one-man armies, which go by well on total secrecy or the right to. But if you're trying to build up to bigger levels of investment, you're trying to do bigger things at scale, you need to have more surety. I think it'll come through as well in insurance, because the other thing that building up a profile on NOSTR would allow you to do is prove that you've lower than average risk in whatever you're asking to be covered by. And insurance is a good pricing mechanism for the types of risks that we take, So if you've got a good track record, like having a no claims bonus, nobody's screaming at the rooftops because the insurance companies know how many years it's gone since you've last crashed. No one's arguing that should be private data. And the reason is because everyone understands that it's like, I get it. If you can prove you don't crash your car, you get your insurance quote down, and you get my insurance quote down. So that's all right. It doesn't mean...
But they want to put a tracker in your car, though, to track you,
it's
to work out whether you're going too fast.
It's this constant argument, like there's a good reason to have a tracker in your car. If it gets robbed, it's easier to find. Like if you're an insurer, tracking your car, it might not be nefarious on one aspect of it. But the ugly part is when they take good reasons to have tech do things and smush them in to a set menu where in a click of a finger or the change of a boss, they can use that same map to attack somebody, having sold it to them as something that will defend them, which is put a tracker in your car, get your insurance quote down, because when it gets robbed, we can track it, and you can prove to us live that you're not going 80 mile an hour around the B roads. As a 17-year-old, that's how we get your insurance quote down, mate. If you don't like that, it's $5,000 a year, and if you don't like that, it's because look at the statistics for children who crash cars at your age. Your front of your brain's not connected to the back till you're 24. So it's a box in your car, isn't it? So there's a validity in that. But then you get caught on the wrong side of it. It's like, you want people tracked. It's like, well, no, I don't want people tracked. I want to track what they're doing when I'm underwriting the risk of it. I don't need to know what that guy's politics are to throw him out of the insurance market. So I don't need the rest of it. And I think NOSTRs are just a really readily available back end to build these utilities on the front end. And people can pick to what level they're visible and how much they connect one thing to another in their life. You can be private in the things that should be private, and you can be public in the things that we benefit from being public in. And that's the middle, I think, of this whole issue about privacy and secrecy. And you can argue both ends and the extremes of it. It kind of comes around to the same problem.
So does it begin in this world, in these kind of, and then become adopted? And does it ever become adopted on the scale of the opposing thing being ID cards? Does it ever get adopted at that scale, or is it always this parallel system where people use Bitcoin more, people use privacy tools more, people use NOSTR more?
I think the truths of any of the issues are where the world's trying to pull to. So what I mean by that is, if we did go full China, there's still a pressure in that society to be free. And it goes somewhere. And I think that's where the situation is the least sustainable. I don't think a Chinese totality model is an end game. It's necessarily fragile. And the problem with them is that will go down and it will fall in on itself one day. And when it does, there'll be total collapse after it. And I suppose the other side of it is we can't all live in sort of hobbit holes and not engage and do anything or take risk, because you're not really realizing the potential of your identity, of like who you are as a person. You're not going to get there if you're constantly defending yourself. And we're just going to go through the middle of it. And all these attempts to be free, they'll manifest as extremes. They'll manifest as events. These sort of volatility blips that point out where we're missing the truth of something and we're delivering a system that steers away from it. And it'll just have to play out. Some organizations are trying to go in at the top down and then approach a government, get the government top cover for their project where it's free over here. And we'll just have to trust that entity will follow through on what they've agreed with. And then you've got bottom up, which is, it always risks being a little bit LARPy, part-time anarchism, but living on the suburbs of fiat developed country, and just sort of moonlighting on the weekends, being a sort of Edward Snowden, and not really having any impact. So it's hard to draw the middle, and I think all these projects are trying to do it in a different way. Obviously, a lot in Bitcoin and Free Cities is grassroots. So it's people who have deep convictions and have to live in an environment that's not the same values. Do you abdicate that? And you're just like the black sheep in a society and making comments on it and sort of adapting to it? Or what, revolutionary guerrilla warfare or something? And no, not, it's not that either. And I think the pressure just to transact freely and get things cheaper and make things better quality and give people what they want is just going to force a path through the middle. And that's why I like the NOSTR stuff so much. You
could argue that it might follow the same trajectory as Bitcoin, which was quite LARPy to begin with, you could say. And now we sit at this moment in history when it's bizarre. I remember one news article about Bitcoin coming out 8 years ago and going,
and it being a big deal,
shit.
just to get a mention in a newspaper.
Right.
It was just this remarkable, same feeling, by the way, same sort of disorientating, like, what, I've just heard that from
I 8 pieces of news every day about something weird happening,
Like, we take a 24-hour snapshot, just for everyone to remember. Inside of 24 hours, we've had Israel bombing the tar out of Iran's nuclear facilities. We've had the US Nimitz carrier strategic group move away from Taiwan towards the Middle East. That's huge stuff. We've had a Bitcoin venture capital, a gold miner, VC based in UK, move into Bitcoin mining. Just in a constellation of events inside of one little slither of time.
Yeah,
gold miners are becoming Bitcoin miners.
In the year that the US created a Bitcoin strategic reserve.
Yeah.
Within 2 years of the biggest hedge fund in the world creating the biggest ETF in history.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all a bit like it's almost like a joke now. It's almost like nothing matters.
You're trying to track the path of something that's sort of like the cousin of Bitcoin, the younger cousin of Bitcoin, I think, in NOSTR. It's not the same. It's not like brother sister, because it lacks vital aspects of Bitcoin. But it's a network that's not optimized to be money. It's a network optimized for the user of Bitcoin. It's the bootloader for the user of the emergent tech, which was Bitcoin. So we got our money right before we found a way for us to interact with it safely. Bitcoin's fine. Bitcoin doesn't care about the battle groups. Not much. It doesn't care about the this or that things that affect Bitcoiners. Bitcoiners are still in big trouble. We're still carbon, and we're still subject to the laws of violence. We can still be coerced. We can still be threatened. There's a massive spike in Bitcoin kidnappings, crypto kidnappings. Ledger CEO got shut down for £5 million with just a straight up robbery. So that Bitcoin didn't care. Like the Bitcoin was all safe. It didn't crack the encryption of Bitcoin. They didn't interrupt the mining supply. They didn't change the amount of nodes pointing this way or that. Bitcoin is fine. The problem is that we are using it, and it's the only reason it exists is to serve us, and we can't interact with it as safely as it can interact with itself. It's abstract. It's completely digital and abstract, and that's great. But it's over there. We just having that asset, it's a big deal because it's an ultimate right of property, isn't it? No one else can destroy that ownership, but they can still definitely have fun with you. And the demand and the implications of good money that can't be used at scale because we're still trying to use it on a fiat map that has regulations and taxes and orders by violence, force, things that are majority popular but aren't true, huge issues, things that push costs into the future, healthcare. Everyone has a right to free healthcare, but it's always on the generation that's not been born yet to pay. So that's why we're generous. We're just eating our own grandchildren to get kidney dialysis today. And it's gross. The reason is the money isn't enforced in the analog world. It's a perfect principle, and it can be perfect because it's digital. It has 0 grams of weight. Without stating the obvious, you can't stab it and you can't destroy it. And that's already happened in a way. That already come out the canon, and it's already been adapted to the world. Has it completely shattered the system it's in? No, it's kind of warped it. The system can't destroy it, so it has to adapt to it. It's like skin going around a splinter or something. So it's adapting. Bitcoin's not ubiquitous. They have got control over aspects of it, bottlenecks and flows, but they haven't defeated it, and it doesn't feel captured. And now we've got NOSTR, sort of 3, 5, 10 years behind it. It's hard to tell, but like in the stream, like in behind Bitcoin, benefiting from what, and we also get the look at where did Bitcoin stop? Where was Bitcoin attacked along the way? And we can sort of have a guess at where NOSTR will go based on where Bitcoin is. And I think that's where it's aiming at. It's aiming at this middle economy, this real economy. And it's saying, okay, this is interesting. Here's Bitcoin, I log in with that and I move UTXOs. Here's NOSTR, I log in with that with the exact same encryption. And I post notes. And they're informal and there's an unlimited amount of them, but you know they're from me. And no one else can send them. And we just build on that. But where it builds to, like Lego, is out of social media accounts, and you follow your mate, who's the funny guy or the guy who just checks in every now and then. And you follow a business, and you follow them to look at their history and decide whether you want their product or not. And the more that business can show that's provable and at high fidelity, instead of just marketing bump, and the more it's punished for doing poor products, leaving people worse off than they find them. I don't think that's an erosion of privacy at all. I think that's highlighting exactly what you're meant to highlight in a productive economy, what you're good at. What will you come through and do? And what does it cost you not to? Because you only have to cock one thing up to not have that reputation anymore, as we know. So that's what NOSTR will do. It'll allow us to scale to higher projects than one person without needing to go right the way up to a state-level government and argue a clause in their constitution and bet that they're going to follow through on that and not change it.
It's funny, over the years of being into the Free Cities thing, I've learned to really appreciate the difference between, I see it like this now. Bitcoin was freedom in the digital realm, and as much as is possible, the ideas that we look at on this podcast and in the whole movement are trying to create freedom in the physical world, which is probably not possible. It's certainly not possible to the degree you get it in the digital world, put it that way.
Oh, that's so true.
Right, but let me just go on a bit. So if you think about Bitcoin and the freedom in the digital world, that's new. It's new. The scarcity is new. There's lots of aspects of Bitcoin which is brand new to the human mind to actually live this thing. What does that show us in the physical world? How do we get it right in the physical world? Because I know we probably can never get true freedom in the physical world. So we're trying to optimize it, aren't we? We're trying to get the best thing. You know, one method is put a fence around your bit of land, and then within there you get freedom. Another thing, you know, blah blah blah. So where do we go with this? Where do we go to get? Maybe using NOSTR, maybe using whatever, you know, because we've got all these new technologies.
Yeah.
You know.
So this is a strategic question, and it's a really hard question. This is us staring into the constellation and guessing where the future's going. And while things are so uncertain, it's hard. It's to take account of what you've just asked. Is where does this like absolutely batshit never happened before thing travel across a map that's never happened before and never been more volatile? But strategically, if you were talking about a freedom movement in a reverse of the way potentially like a socialist revolution happens, where one of the pillars of socialism is fractional reserve banking, what you would see in an emergent freedom movement that is persistent and reinvesting its gains and enjoying more space than before is in a removal of that pillar that undermines what that pillar puts up, which is socialism, collectivism, and mob rule until it runs out of food. And so let's look at this as a strategic thing, and we've already unlocked a denied area of economics and society by being able to ultimately transact on a separate network. So there was a closed prison cell, and Bitcoin's broke open a door that allows your property to step in there and lock itself up safely and can't be destroyed. That's crucial. If you can destroy something and have the final say in its destruction with no repercussions, or repercussions no one's prepared to take on you, you own it. That's the physical realm. Sam's not too happy about that. I think we've got to talk about security.
Yeah.
This or chickens is probably the best.
What's that noise? Is it?
It's a slow-moving tractor he thinks is on the land, and it's not. It's just coming up the road. All this furs up and all that, but it's super handy.
Yeah, we've got a very small dog, but she still barks when anyone's like half a mile down the drive. So.
And then, like within 3 meters of getting towards him, having looked like that,
yeah,
it just squeak and lick your face.
Yeah, lick you to death.
Yeah, so right. it's just a guy moving some. He's been on this like 10 runs a day.
Is that the rocks guy?
Yeah.
Where's he taking it? Are they building a road or something?
I don't know. I just know that you can't bag it and sell rock. You're into the environmental stuff. But if you've got a rock pit, you can take it and you can put it on another site, and because you're not selling it, you're allowed to just keep going at it.
Well, you can. I mean, we've ordered a few tons of rock to build a wall. You know,
off the quarry, yeah. But they'll have all this regulatory this and environmental that and planning rights. But if a farmer, you've got a hill and it's made of rock with grass on top. If you're chipping away at it to cap your own road, it's okay. But if you do that, put it in bags and sell it to you for your driveway, you're a quarry. You're into quarrying. See, like these division of labours and the way they regulate stuff and that. But that's just the environment we're in.
Yes.
And it's hard to do commerce like that's sympathetic to Bitcoin, its principles.
Do you want any of that, by the way?
Oh, yeah. You think I need more of that?
I bought cold coffee because I thought I thought you won't give me coffee.
It's the caffeine.
Yeah, me too.
I'm just going to nip out for a loop.
Oh, all right.
Related subject.
Go on.
Hold your question then, mate. Sounds like a good one. Sorry, mate. Are we still recording?
Of course it is.
Okay.
I always like that.
Sorry.
Rogan does that. People go out and have pisses.
Apparently you can go for like 6 hours.
Yeah. I think that's one of the I think he did one with Alex Jones. It was 6.5 hours. No, I want to go back to this question.
Yeah.
Bitcoin digital world, freedom, free cities or something.
Yeah.
It's the biggest blue bottle I've ever seen. Something in the real world that's the equivalent. And it's to do with governance, because it's to do with freedom. And it's to do with, should I be governed? Should I be free?
Right. This area of adoption is the bit that I'm at, and it's the hardest. It's outside of the lower bound of LARPing and part-time activism, which is fine, and it's nice to know at conferences and things that people are into the same things you are, feeling the same way about things. But above informal and outside of black markets, which were illegal anyway, and probably for good reason, the root of it, things like Silk Road, sending heroin to teenagers or whatever the narratives are, the ability to do that's probably wrong. But they're things that are enforced and they just happen anyway. But then there's this other thing, and while everybody's still frothing at the mouth about like ripping down fiat institutions and it's all gonna pop and the money's all debt, it's true, but there's an element of overlap in what of all this shit we have to put up with that's still valuable and still quite a good way of doing things. You know, let's take out like building regulations because they're bureaucratic. Okay, but let's keep the principles of the values of the structures so that we're not building houses that flop over. And I say this because if we're going to reduce state influence, we have to diminish its responsibilities and its ability to hold them properly. And it doesn't enforce the laws it speaks to be responsible for broadly. It doesn't always enforce borders. It doesn't always give you a good health experience. And when they fuck up, it's an inquiry or an apology at best, 10, 20 years after something's happened. And in the free market, it would be a right quick dust up and a bankruptcy. And the people who got the benefit and profits from doing that lose everything. That part of the economy, we want to keep that. Like family businesses are adaptable in fiat economies. You can still have them. They might be undermining the reasons why families are important and all of that with regulations where they can set on and off. But the bit where we work with a family business or work with someone with a long reputation, I want to keep that. And this area of adoption is the one that sits above what you can do furtively or no one cares about because it's like El Salvadorian coffee or something. It's not to diminish that. It's to say that's below a scale that these these governments and state authorities care about. As long as you do it on the edges of their map, they don't care. The bit that's hard to do is the bit that still allocates capital at scale. So you have a meaningful life and you need skills and you need to feel good about what you're doing. And have it that it's sympathetic to Bitcoin, sympathetic to privacy, and sympathetic to freedom, but can still grow to a scale where it's not attacked in the real economy. So it has to render to Caesar and pay its taxes, but it also has to support the mission and the progress of freedom. And that's hard-won ground. And going back to your question about Bitcoin and NOSTR and strategic, I think this area of the economy is where the tools on NOSTR will be picked up and developed for real use cases and help us demonstrate the alternative way without the full cost of an alternative system. We can map NOSTR to the processes that fiat channels use and can chop and bend and coerce you with, and just build a parallel scaffolding framework around the same risks so that when they get cut, their perceived damage to you is lower because they know you've got a rope to fall back on. So NOSTR might go a long way just keeping up with the basic affairs of the people that use it in terms of commerce and reputation. And it might only be used when the fiat rails fail. And so you'll get the NOSTR adoptions in spikes like we did with Bitcoin. This is why it's similar, over crises and over things that draw the eye and draw the attention. WikiLeaks, huge period of time for Bitcoin. Silk Road, huge period of time for Bitcoin. Public adoption with the recent deification of Michael Saylor. It's a big moment. And there's loads you disagree with Mr. Saylor, but you don't have his perspective. So why would you agree with him on everything? As a piece of litigation and investor management, it was a masterclass. He rotated an investor base legally and profitably and ethically into a Bitcoin treasury, and did it on a public company that templated it and shown every other company it's listed exactly what course they plotted through the map to get the bit they wanted out of the Bitcoin tech, but not make themselves so adapted to it that they're illegitimate. And that's a fucking hard thing to do.
But run that thought experiment with NOSTR then. What would be a situation or a person or a company that would operate a similar plan with NOSTR?
Okay. Well, let's take something we know exists already, and it's simple, but it's in use, and we don't need to argue it. Let's go back to these peer-to-peer exchanges. So it's the simplest level of abstract commerce. You have Bitcoin UTXOs, I have a fiat bank account. We enter into an escrow. There are time windows. There are standards to meet, like an old law contract. Old English law is not written into the Bitcoin blockchain, so it won't serve as a basis for us to do legal contracts. But if you log in and you've got your HODL HODL account and you've done a few good trades in the past, you're set up to be able to show that you can do a future contract from your ability to do previous ones. And then you enter into that contract, and it's like all of the iterations inside that add up to 1 in terms of probability, which is to say, once you've put your deposit down and once I put mine down and we've both agreed to do this, one of two things happens. Either both parties do it and they transact as agreed, or one fails and there's a grievance procedure. Not a single point has the local jurisdiction been involved. This is where it is applicable in 2 places, because you've got the local site-based reputation system and its rules that are enforced first, and after, that transaction is still eligible for potentially a small claim, like when you don't get your Amazon parcel delivered and you claim against the seller, and it can be enforced by a fiat law. And so the way to adopt Bitcoin is not to think of it that when things are adopted in Bitcoin, it's at the expense of what's there already. What you want to do is make shapes and transactions and products that run on fiat rails, but also can run on Bitcoin rails, and you try and match them as closely to each other as possible. And it's hard. That is damn hard to do. If you stand out too much and you make yourself so not like alien to where you live and the community you serve, there becomes an exclusivity thing, you're alienated, and then you're attacked and brought low. And so the best thing to do is to be eligible for both systems, I think. Which is to say, we don't take any, we meet our requirements, we follow our law. But we've also got tech that we're doing that because if we don't, we'll be destroyed by somebody. We're not doing it because it's the way to regulate the structure of buildings. We do it because we're told to. But if we had a customer who wasn't subject to those laws, we can still demonstrate that something's strong or of a certain quality just by its self-evident proof, proving the qualities of it. And the way that that's shown potentially on a NOSTR account is that you do go through that with somebody and they don't need all the stamps and stickers, but they still get a product they like.
I'm just thinking about...
And then tell people that they had a good interaction. Hey, I got this product. I paid what I expected and I got what I expected.
I'm just thinking about maybe NOSTR. Maybe the digital identity thing. Was once again is Bitcoin and NOSTR are so important to work together because Bitcoin. Do you believe Bitcoin defunds the state first? Simple yes or no.
Simple yes or no. Yes.
Okay. And NOSTR emasculates the government.
Simple yes or no.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So the state is kind of co-opting Bitcoin slowly. They're not fighting it, and they've probably got a plan to sort of, control it in some shape or form. Whether or not it works, we'll have to see. I think people like you and me.
Imagine you've got 2 runners in a race, and one is freedom tech and one is government tech. There's a point where the runner stops trying to run for the line and runs to the other runner to beat them up. And the boundary we push as Bitcoiners is where you push in the same direction a government's trying to claim. Like, we'll look after your finances. We'll look after your food supply. And Bitcoin and the freedom tech and all the stuff that supports it, from farms through to core devs through to the totally abstract, are racing against an ability to do that for themselves. So, no, we don't need these laws. I make a choice on my health decisions. And as it's like cops and robbers, when the freedom tech allows you to unlock areas of your life that would have been denied on purely fiat rails, it gives you an off-ramp. It gives you an ability to trade, get everything you wanted from what the government set menu promised, but without any of the side effects and without any of the abuse potential. That's where Bitcoiners get the most benefit. But it's also the hardest area of the economy to win, because the minute you go out of the abstract and the hackathons and the GitHub forks and the little programs you can put on a torrent and never be seen, once you move into stuff of substance that affects people's physical quality of life and what they experience inside of an actual day in a human skin, not as a UTXO on a chip. I think some people live on these Bitcoin signers. They think that their money's safe and they're safe. Or they just have two different modes where they're Bitcoiners when the Bitcoin hat's on and then just part of the crowd the rest of the time. And I think the hardest area to sit in is where you're still serving the real economy at scale, because that's quite a powerful position to sit in, and you just have to be sympathetic and use as contingency. And in NOSTR's case, sometimes it's cheaper just to run NOSTR than it is to get some privacy, not anti-privacy tech. For instance, remote viewing or access control. It's cheaper to use Keat, Hole Punch, to do video streaming because it's free than it is to get a Google account and do Meet. So the freedom tech stuff is actually sometimes, on a real project, the cheapest to deliver for that capability that you need. Opening and closing gates. It's either walled garden ring doorbells that you pay subscriptions to and you don't own the data, or it could just be a NOSTR pull down.
But at the end of the day, the state can come in with guns and shut it down, right? No, but this is why I was saying that the Bitcoin element is so important, because over the long term, theoretically, Bitcoin defunds that ability. That's where they work together.
Yeah, right.
Because, I don't think we can ever solve for the state coming in with guns, basically. Or going full communism, or for whatever,
We don't have to. The truth always wins, historically. But
wait a minute, justify that.
Well,
the truth always wins. But the truth is often losing. In that moment, the truth's not winning,
right. It's losing.
You could say that the truth always loses in the end. It depends which part of the cycle you're in.
That might be a better way of putting it. The truth.
No. I mean, the truth always loses. If you're in the point where you're losing, then you'll think this is the end. Oh, it'll win in the end. But then it wins in the end. And
it's cyclical, I'd say. And it might be it's a little bit like owning Bitcoin, is that you constantly, every day, you feel like you've given something up or you're losing. But then there are just these moments and days where you go, fucking hell, that's gone up a lot. It's that constant feeling that we're losing ground, we're being attacked, things are getting worse. But I mean, historically, for us to even be here has been only the result of that argument being won over and over and over again in human history. So things are different in that the magnitude of everything is pretty bad, maybe the worst ever. But we are only here because this argument's been won over and over. And when it's come down to it, there's been an awful bloody fight over it. But there's been an awful bloody fight over it, and then it's won on that battlefield, literally. And then it's enforced, and then it's degraded again, and then you have to go and fight for it again. And I think that the progress of Bitcoin has been non-violent. That's what's so impressive about it. It's had no physical enforcement whatsoever. It's took nobody, well, a handful of people maybe, arguably, to risk themselves physically. It's quite bloodless. But there is this all or nothing issue at stake. And I'm just saying that we need to survive the middle bit and not get taken out too quickly, and just see if you can support it and keep it going and keep it alive, and concentrate on that so much as working out whether it's going to win or lose and how. It's just to keep it going and bring it back, use Bitcoin principles and use the tools to the scale of your life and try and adapt them into your life in a negotiated way. If you're too extreme, you'll stand out. If you're not extreme enough, you'll have no impact and the movement doesn't go on. And it's that dangerous middle ground. And where we are in terms of like 2025, middle of summer, is the world's kicking off. The volatility that's been stored up over maybe a lifetime is starting to crackle like an earthquake. And big things are happening, big things we can't control. But there's this middle ground that's the next challenge, I think, that extends the freedom movement. And it's to move into that visible part of society. It's not to no longer be furtive and separate and satellited, but to actually try to adapt the normal comings and goings of life with this technology as it improves and as it becomes more ubiquitous. I still don't think we have Bitcoin at an acceptable level in money, at least not in the UK and regionally. But in the US, there'll be large sections of places or industries or places where you can just get stuff done in Bitcoin. And that wouldn't have been the case 10 years ago. And NOSTR's the same, it's just a few years behind, and it's solving for a different problem. It's kind of onboarding Bitcoiners and entities into this web of trust, where money went first in its abstract, and then humans didn't go with it. And we need a layer to get the principles of Bitcoin, but apply them at a human scale in a normal life, not to get small and hide on a ranch. Not that that's a bad thing. I like my ranchers, but it's just to say there's a run away and hide over there until they've had a fight, or there's a stay engaged and get big enough and stay with the pack enough that when it does become critical, you've got some sway, you've got some capital allocation, and you've got some capability that people have to choose between burning you or burning what you do as a job or a life or or what you produce. And the more responsibility you can have, the more protected you are from it being taken off you. Because if they take it off you, they lose the capability of what you have. So you've got to constantly be pushing your values. And I think if you just do it at an individual level, or you try to go to that small scale, you're doing the right thing, but you're not having an impact. It's the difference between someone who litter picks around their village green. And it's not to criticize that as an intent. I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do. I'm saying the scale is not big enough to have an impact. That's not the work. The work is like the ocean cleanup, like that young lad who took shipping containers out into the Pacific Ocean. He pulls 50 tons of trash out of the ocean. That's scale. That's hard. It's the same principle. It's just damn hard. And I think that the bit we're pushing into with Bitcoin, NOSTR and Freedom Tech is into the real economy. It's making meritocracy more socially acceptable again. It's making doing the right thing valuable again. Not having it washed back into a taxation budget, and not having it that we've got an anonymous society that can roll through groups and defraud them, or hurt them, or just not do what you're going to say and then go, and have the blanket of that to hide your trail under an umbrella of privacy. It's perverse.
It's you're basically describing like a kind of return to morals, and in a very 21st century way. No, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because lots of generations have said the same thing, haven't they? You know what I mean?
They haven't had the ability to, from the minute we were able to scratch words into the paper, we've had an ability to record what's happened. But it's not had high fidelity. It's been hard to prove. Everybody's got the ability to publish. But what if we started to tie these data points to things that are harder to forge than noise, than words? What if we tied them to locations? Well, what happens then is you've highlighted yourself as a location to people who mean you harm. So how do we abstract the ability to say you're here and that you're of substance, but it not be a big deal if people know where you are? You've got to... The trick is to negotiate what you've learnt about Bitcoin and how it's better and how it's truthful and what's good about it in the long run, and take the principles and abstract them into places that Bitcoin isn't dominant, which is the physical world, the physical economy.
What's interesting about Bitcoin, though, that I've noticed, is years ago, the theory of what might transpire was laid out and was talked about and discussed, and it's kind of happening that way. For example, people use Bitcoin as savings now. They do.
Not just people.
But like, or
We've got
whatever.
countries using
Right, okay.
You know, but that's, yeah.
But
you're right.
people said that would happen, and they said that would be part of the process as well. And it is part of the process.
It is.
And it is happening now. And now I hear it on the most mainstream of mainstream news.
Yes.
That people are preserving their wealth in this digital
And gold,
thing.
this is what's interesting. A gold mine has switched to Bitcoin mining. And they've been able to make the case in an investor note by saying, this is gold mining. We're still expending energy to have something that holds its value. So they're getting it on the level that it was designed at. And it's changing because they realise, well, it's all mining. We're doing a difficult process for a steady rate of income on something that can't be diluted. So why is Bitcoin out of the party? And that's where you want to be in a freedom argument, is where the merits of what you're bringing in still enforce all the regulation and all the good intent tries to, but it does it better, and it leaves the downsides of dictatorial systems and fiat systems out of the picture. That is the golden middle of where adoption needs to go. It's also the hardest place to stand. It's miserable to try and adapt something that is supportive of Bitcoin, runs on Bitcoin rails to the degree it's possible, but also doesn't stand out as an enemy or in the wrong side of the law in the place it's operating. And you need a place to operate because it's real economy. It's stuff that Bitcoin won't get for us. It's soft commodities. It's water, food, and all of that prepper stuff. But that's the next part to adapt to. Primary industries and secondary industries and small verticals. That's a real it's a circular economy, but it's scale. It's GDP points. It's productivity with a capital P. It's not proof of concept and small and proving that the tech works on a little sandbox. It's applying it to a postcode and letting it lower the price and increase the quality of goods as a result of using that. That's the argument you can make. And you say, right, well, you take that away, my prices go up, or the business is gone. So you pop that part of what you're trying to affect me to do, and you'll take the whole lot. You'll take everything away. And you can't recreate it. That's the argument. But it's a very hard place to stand. And it's a very dangerous place to stand, I think. Because you are very visible. And you don't ever want to be the most visible lightning rod. Because those people get killed, coerced, made fun of, made example of.
Yes, but like you say, of all the revolutions that's ever happened, Bitcoin has been quite a non-violent one. And
so far,
correct, yeah.
Because the Tea Party was non-violent compared to the War of Independence. Like we've got our riots, we've got our, I call them volatility blips, like these releases of pent-up aggression and energy. It's false peace what we're in now. I wouldn't mean to say that Bitcoin is bloodless forever. It's to say that so far, given how much of the area it's unlocked to people who just want to transact without banks, it's done it with an awful small casualty list so far. But
why do you think that is? Do they not get it or something? Like, why don't like? Is there a point going to come when they suddenly realise, oh shit, this is undermining everything we use to maintain power?
It's what is the one thing in an entire train set of somebody that like these controlling people? What is the one thing they can't destroy? They can destroy literally anything. On a focused beam, they can blow up anyone and anywhere and anything, except Bitcoin. I think that's why it's been bloodless, because blood doesn't take away from its ability to transact. There's no way to get that system to die.
But what I mean is, if someone in power decided to confiscate Bitcoin, on scale,
yeah,
there'd be blood in the beginning, I think they'd soon realise it's very difficult to enforce.
Whose blood? I mean, like, I don't think they
But
get...
owners of the Bitcoin. I mean, the first guy that has his door knocked on,
Yeah.
what's he going to do? Just hand it over?
What about the second guy?
Yeah, exactly. I think in the end, it goes very quickly.
You're getting close to your 30th guy, and the government costs are $2 million. And the yield on that attack might be 2. Do you think by the 10th and the 50th person on that list, they're up in profit? And do you think they look any better for taking people house to house and looting them? How did that look to anybody else? We've seen do it in history.
Well, I don't know. I mean, funny, I was listening to a pod on the way over here, and they were talking about the Nixon shock. And go and listen to that speech and realise what an absolutely outrageous thing that was.
Yeah, but
basically, someone, the premier, the powerful person in America stood up and said to the rest of the world, "Hey, you know all that gold you gave us?
We don't
It's ours now."
Yeah, we might have it.
No, you can't have it back.
Well, it wasn't Nixon. I mean, the first time that was 1933. It was the banning of gold in the US.
Right. But what I mean is, no one in power has ever been shy to do absolutely outrageous things. I mean, when the America says, "You know all that gold you gave to us, the rest of the world, and these are big countries, these are ancient countries, we've got it now and you can't have it back." Yeah. And because we can, basically was the answer there, because we can.
The bullies, they're not stupid. They're bullies, but they're not stupid. And they know, like bullies know, you can't fight everyone. You can't. Your profit as a bully is to the degree you can threaten people without spending energy. And that doesn't mean bullies don't spend energy. We see focused attacks all the time, but those attacks have to do more than the kilowatt value of those punches. They have to do more. They have to chill the 9 other people who are represented by the people who are being punished. That's a public execution. It's enough to change individual decisions to doing something a certain way by seeing what happens when someone tries it once. But the lie, and the same lie that goes on in prisons all around the world, is that the capacity of the prison isn't totally strong enough to overwhelm the prison guards. It is constantly, but it's kept in place because one crab has to climb out the barrel first, and nothing good ever happens to that crab. Bitcoin maybe has been bloodless because it's so coordinated, and there's no part of it that stands proud of all the rest of the parts of it as it grows. It's very hard to pick what point of it you're going to spend your energy on, because it's just so synchronous and so hard, so abstract. It's not physical. You can't check someone's house for Bitcoin like you could with gold bars or drugs. It's totally abstract, but we still keep that hook of value. We still use it as a scoreboard to swap value around, and it's pervasive. It's not gone anywhere. It's got bigger. And worse, it's been adopted into the fiat systems in some form of legitimacy. 10 years ago, it was a scam. It was an unregulated scam. When did the US start holding it on their balance sheet? Is it still a scam? So things change really gradually, and under that, everybody's quite down, and it's scary. But look at the progress that's been made without really any... There's been blips, there's been people who've been made examples of, there's been disasters and calamities in Bitcoin. But Bitcoin's center has moved, it's grown out. Like, directional progress in Bitcoin's amazing. But the day-to-day stories and threats and arguments are what it feels like. But the reality is it's moving directionally in a freedom direction, without having a pitched battle in the middle.
So, as I was saying earlier, the theory always was that Bitcoin will be adopted as savings, and then it will become a medium of exchange.
No, I've always pushed back on
But that does seem to be happening.
No, I don't think it is. I think it's just you're feeling two parts of the elephant. Because you can go right back to the white paper and say, no, look at the title. It's peer-to-peer cash.
True.
Right, so then you've got an argument going on a Bitcoin conference on a picnic bench, haven't you? One guy's store of value with a MicroStrategy hat on, and one's got a hoodie on and was leaning towards Bcash but went the way of the fork. And he's saying, no, this is Lightning, and it's got to be usable, and it's got to be cash. But it's two people arguing about the two sides of what makes money. It's an arch. I think money, the word money, looks in my mind like a bridge. And the 2 points, the MOE, the medium of exchange, and the store of value, are like two pillars that come up and support the arch. And if you knock one away, you don't have the other. And the reason is this. If you have a medium of exchange, it has to have value. Otherwise, there's no point exchanging it. And if you have a store of value, it has to be exchangeable. Otherwise, its value is only to people who want it. So it has to be maximally valuable and maximally exchangeable to be the best form of money. To argue one aspect of it against the other is to split the subject. Money has to be micro-divisible to make it easy to exchange. And it has to have value in order to be money. Everybody has to have money in common that you're prepared to swap for something that isn't money. So they're just two sides of one issue argued against itself.
What I mean then is, if you look at the world currently, I think personally, many more people are using Bitcoin as a store of value than as a medium of exchange. Not that that's a bad thing. I think it's an inevitable thing because the more people that use it as a store of value, the more people will then eventually be peer-to-peer exchanging it.
Yep.
And that's what I see in the world, and that's what I mean. It's even a meme amongst Bitcoiners now. Save Bitcoin, spend your tether or whatever. Whatever.
I get lost in these semantics, mate, because we're just arguing about the different aspects of money. Is it money when you spend it? Yeah.
No, but I mean, in the real world, if you turn on NBC, there's they talk about saving. They don't talk about spending Bitcoin. They talk about saving Bitcoin. They talk about the sailors on there, their so-and-so's on there. And I think if you took a survey of people who own Bitcoin, I would say 80% of them store their value in it. 20% of it.
But they store it because it's money. I mean, let's take an extreme example. If we split them as issues as a point of rhetoric, and we said, right, let's give examples of where Bitcoin's used as a store of value. Let's pick an easy one. Let's pick either the dollar strategic reserve or sailor stash. We'll pick sailor stash. To invest in it as a store of value is to underline your conviction that it can be exchanged in the future as a medium. Why would you store nuts in the ground if you didn't think you could either eat them or swap them? So when you stack...
You can't eat a Bitcoin, mate.
You can't eat Bitcoin and you can't live in sats.
I can't live in a Bitcoin.
By storing something... How can you store something and say I'm storing it because it's good for storage? What are you storing? Is it got value? Yeah, it's got a value. Okay, so it can be exchanged subjectively by negotiation. Yeah. So the more Bitcoin you stack and you say I'm saving. Saving is a means word. It's a means to an end. You're not saving to save. You're saving to spend.
I know, but I think the majority currently of people who save Bitcoin will probably turn it into a fiat currency when they spend it.
Yes.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's do you want more of that?
Yeah.
That's what I mean about we are the theory that Bitcoin will be used as savings first and then as a medium of exchange more seems to be based, and that's what I'm basing it on.
Well, look what's happened. You apply where the progress is of it, Bitcoin, I mean, to where we are in the economy, and it's interesting to see which aspects of Bitcoin's value apply to which areas of the economy. I'd argue medium of exchange, if viewed as a separate subject. I don't. I think it's one half of a word called money, but the medium of exchange elements of it have moved to the lower scale of transaction, and the higher uses of Bitcoin in terms of volume are used to store value. So we've got a barbell. We've got a low end of the economy that supports farmers markets and podcast subscriptions and grants and donations and T-shirts and all of these things that you can buy with a Lightning wallet. So it's totally dominant in medium of exchange at the level of an event. But you can't buy a car with it. That middle ground, that barbell is gone. And then the next time you see Bitcoin active on the economy is at state and blue chip level, and they are buying it to hold it. So it's kind of weird. The medium of exchange guys that are against store of value get huge value from these holders, and vice versa, because the holders who are holding it like gold coins get the comfort of knowing that it's active and being used. But what both are avoiding is the middle economy. Objects of high value that would hit limits on things like tax regulation, things of scale, things of substance, cars to houses to businesses, middle economy, have to identify yourself, have to be legitimate. Bitcoin is a desert in those areas. There's no way you can lose 5 figures of non-KYC Bitcoin. You can lose a few $100s to a passport, to a signing device, or you can lose $20 to a T-shirt. Can you spend 20 grand of it round trip without breaking the law? Harder. There are a few use cases, but my point is that it's strange straight away to argue one end of a subject against the other, because money has to be exchangeable and it has to have intrinsic value, or a value that people will exchange it for. Otherwise, why are you exchanging it? It's worthless. You can't use it to counterbalance something that you want, like timber or a car or a house. So if it's got no value, you can't exchange it because the other guy doesn't want it. And if you can't exchange it, it hasn't got value. It's limited in its value by how it's limited to be exchanged. So it's two sides of an argument. But when you apply it to where Bitcoin's adopted, I'll grant you that at the lower end, medium of exchange is being proven out. How quick, how easy it is to make purchases theoretically or at a small scale. But the reason it's kept small is because you go into personal tax bans, you go into capital gains, and outside of that de minimis, I bought some Bitcoin on Coinbase and I spent it in a coffee when I was on holiday in El Salvador. No one's going to come with the guns for you. Or if they do, you would be an example and it would be bad overall for them. But that middle ground is the tax base. And
is that going to change it? And
yeah.
How does it change?
It's harder one ground, man. Like if you're small and you're hard to see, you're small. So you can't get hit, but you can't hit back. That's the dichotomy. You either hide and become like a parallel society but it has to be small because it's not as strong as the main society physically. Or you have to be so big that you can bend the rules of it at the state level, changes in law, at the blue chip level, changes in governance. And you've got to be big on that side. And it's just interesting to me that on both edges of the economy, the fiat extremes in the billionaire and one hop from the central bank, Bitcoin has been acknowledged and is integrating. And the only other place when you go down the ticket price and the activities in an economy that you see it active and crackling is on Wallet of Satoshis at conferences or an equivalent level of scale.
So do you think this is how it pans out then? Because what's stopping it, obviously, I think, well, not one of the things that's stopping it is the capital gains. Is
exactly.
Classing it as, instead of classing it as money,
but by the
classing
way,
it as an asset.
That is also the area of the barbell that it doesn't have capital gains, right? In one use case, it's too small. Fucking T-shirt, capital gains on a T-shirt. We're not enforcing that. It's going to cost more money to phone them and chase them than it would be to get 20 cents of capital gains. So they can't enforce it on the lower band. And all the tax breaks are for billionaires and corporations. So there's no tax. There's no capital gains tax up at that higher end, and that's why it's been adopted. So
Hold on a sec, explain that. Why is there no cap gains at a very high level?
They have a degree of influence over the ability to fight their own tax audits that a blue collar family wouldn't have. So Michael Saylor, I don't need to go back to him, but he's just a standout example of a big holder, and he's done it in a public way and done it in a way that's ostensibly not illegal and is compliant. He has a general counsel. He has strategic resources he can game out and get advice on and spend time and resource to walk that line in a way that it would be hard for somebody who's living on a margin in a smaller business. So it's a fight, let's say, that a family business wouldn't have to accept Bitcoin and to say, well, we don't pay tax on that. But for someone at that level, they can get tax breaks. They can do tax harvesting. They get good lawyers in. They basically limit the cost of carrying Bitcoin to the level that people that do it in an informal way get, which is close to zero or zero. And the benefit of the Bitcoin is the capital appreciation of it. And the way Michael Saylor's been able to do it in the particular is to issue debt against it instead of disposing of it. Both ways realise a gain. One is a way that you use the existing recent increase in value to create more paper to give you more cash to buy more Bitcoin, and you're putting on an accumulating bet. It's bold, but I just point out that it's no surprise to me that the two places in the economy that have the least violence applied, which is where it's too small to bother and where you could get hit back by someone with an equivalent amount of resource, are the two places that Bitcoin's made more progress. And the bit in the middle is the bit that's bullied out of its tax, pushed around, has very limited life, doesn't really have a lot to live for, which is that middle class that just does something steadily and pays its taxes, pays its bank interest, and just keeps going. It's Boxer in Animal Farm, that level of society. It's like I'll work hard, I'll go along with it, it'll come good in the end, I just keep going, and then you have a heart attack and die. And that's the bit that there is no Bitcoin in use. Because to buy materials...
It's being saved there, I reckon.
It's what?
It's being saved.
Yeah, I think what you might get are very common, I don't doubt it, are like profitable businesses perhaps, or profitable sole traders, people with high incomes that just after their tax, after their costs, have 20 grand, have 50 grand and buy Bitcoin with it. But they're either going to move to somewhere it's not taxed, or they're going to hold it for a long time till there is no tax.
Interestingly, what you've started noticing now is companies forming who are offering the ability to loan, to borrow against your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Which is obviously a symptom of holders from probably, 2015 holders who now are like, shit, I don't want to spend this, but I want to do what Saylor's doing. And now I think Jack Mallers has just started a company that does that, hasn't he? And I don't know. What do you think about that? Is that a bad long-term thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both terrible.
Because of the fiat aspect of it.
Because you're taking a long volatility idea, which is owning Bitcoin outright with money that you've made and you have no claims on you have no credit against you and you've got an excess. That's what you buy Bitcoin with. I think when you start stacking paper against it to get more, you give up control over that. And in leveraged Bitcoin positions, that is your cutoff. That's where your collateral and the value of your position turn upside down. And it's a great idea until that number on the Bitcoin ticker liquidates everything that you did with paper and you have a bigger loss. So you don't really, that's just the law of nature. If you borrow as well as owning Bitcoin, you're
Isn't
opening
that a
up
function
two
of just
corners.
borrowing too soon though? If you own 5 Bitcoins, now's probably not the time to borrow on it. But in 10 years' time, you could probably borrow 50 grand a year or 100 grand a year, possibly even, and it wouldn't be a problem.
It's what you mean is it's proportion. It's not one or the other. Like if you've got loaned Bitcoin TM, it's inherently dangerous. Now, like you could borrow $10 in every $1 million of your Bitcoin and be fairly confident that unless Bitcoin goes to close to zero, you won't be liquidated. So there is element, like it's like everything. There's always in Bitcoin, particularly in Bitcoin, a truth that people pick one side or the other and argue it. And debt is another one of them. It's bad to do a lot of, and it's arguably not optimal to do none of. And people can't work out that you just have a middle of something.
Something that happened a few weeks ago was, it was at the Bitcoin conference, Nigel Farage announced that if he got into power with reform, they would change the cap gains rules on Bitcoin. What I found astonishing about that was they just said they were going to lower it. They didn't say there shouldn't be cap gains on Bitcoin because Bitcoin's money.
Well,
there should be no cap gains. Right.
You did it. You did what 90% of people don't, and it's to capture the buried lead in a statement. These are clever lying in public is a skill. And that is a great example of how you can change nothing about what you're able to do after you're elected by saying something that could be clapped at. That is the art of politics. He's not said anything, and all he's done is underline the fundamental principle that Bitcoin should be taxed. They're not set. What people think they're saying is they're going to get a reprieve on their taxes, but what they're being told is that as long as they accept that it should be taxed, we'll argue and equivocate about what level it should be at, and we can do that after we're elected.
I went even deeper, mate. I saw that as a announcement that the state should exist. Like someone should be able to tax you.
There is stuff like we're into politics now, but like I haven't got a Bitcoin solution for national defence. I've got a solution for local, like paid volunteer fire services and things that a minicus could get onto. But we, in between these episodes and things, we watch hypersonic missiles slam into Tel Aviv, and they're coming in from a perspective where you kind of see what it's like to get the maximum a state can produce pointed at you. And I haven't got something that removes a fiat structure from an economy or a society that then keeps that type of thing.
Is that your model of governance then? Everything is a free market other than the protection of property rights, I suppose you'd call that, would you?
I don't know. I don't think I know there's a lot of people at this end of the politics that wouldn't like to be overly defined. But what I would say is that I'm not an anarchist in the sense I think that there will be no centralised state. And it's not because I believe it should or shouldn't. It kind of doesn't matter, does it? It's what is likely to be enforced with the laws of violence. And it's a bit of an odd term, but what I mean by the laws of violence is we're physical by nature. There's not going to be an abstract system that turns us completely abstract. There'll always be a potential where there's someone who's slightly smarter than someone else, and that person who's not as smart is stronger. And they have a negotiation to make with you. They say, I can't build what you've built because I haven't got the effort or the brains, but I've got enough effort and brains to kick it over. And we'll make that okay by you giving me 10% of it. And then you get to keep it. It's a type of extreme capitalism. And it gets ugly because you pay that Danegeld and they go away, but you can't trust that they'll come back and try it again. And that's what governments do. They take an inch, they get given an inch, and they take miles and miles and do things in your name that you would be disgusted to have done with a vote. But if after you voted and they have the right to do it, most people just go along, right?
Yeah, but even you don't even need to vote on it. Let's face it. You don't vote on the mafia, do you? You don't vote on, and
they vote. By the way, you know, like open the books, like make a like get a capo or get a soldier and make them into a capo as a whole ceremony. Doesn't that look a lot like when senators get sworn in, mate? Put your hand on the magic book, do the ceremony, promise that you'll never ever do anything naughty. Now you're not a human anymore. You are a power allocator. It's the same. Mafia and governments are very similar organisations. Yeah. They rely on public apathy. They're not ostensibly what they say they are. They do things with stated objectives and have underlying objectives. They fall back to rules of violence, and they do it by singling out individuals to enforce a population.
I think it's also a function. The difference between a mafia and the state is how far the abstraction of power of violence has gone. Yeah, I think, you know, and like in the state, it's quite abstract. They hardly ever come and knock on your door. You just fill a form in with a piece of paper and send them money. But the mafia might turn up on your door more frequently and demand some money. It's
a spot check. Like if you've got 200 rifles to inspect to make sure they're clean, and you haven't got the time to inspect 200, you inspect a sample. And the way you enforce violence is you enforce it on a sample. You can't afford to batter the crap out of everybody the way you deep down want to if you're a bully. But you do have time to single out just that right one who's just about beatable, but big enough to scare the shit out of everybody else. And that's what happens.
Have you ever had any thoughts of what an evolutionary step beyond that system is? Like, you can go science fiction here or whatever.
Well, it's taking something that's true, which normally means it can be turned to one thing or another, which is physical capability. It's like, where do you put your energy? Do you put it into building something, or do you put it into threatening someone else to take it down? And these are complicated subjects. It's hard to know when's the right time to fight and when it isn't. But it's I just think there's this thing we've got ahead of ourselves, and Bitcoin is completely non-violent because it does not exist in the physical space. We do, And I think this thing where and they can influence each other. You can reach into that other realm and affect it, but you can't be there. Bitcoin, we don't get and inherit the properties of Bitcoin by owning it. And I think there's a big percentage of people that don't get that. They think, right, my money's safe, so I'm safe. And it's like, no, you're the weakest part of that. And I think progress is just made when you take account of that. That we're never gonna have a Bitcoin standard in that theoretical, completely non-violent, in an environment that just base rewards beating stuff around and having an ability to destroy it. It sounds cynical, but it's not. It's not cynical. It's to say, why would an abstract concept apply itself in a jungle where we live? It wouldn't. The skill is to negotiate that part of it to what you can make work. That's fucking hard.
One of the theories, though, is that the power of the abstract power can stop the violence as well.
It does do that as well.
You know, like I it is a good example. I can't remember who said it, but antlers on a.
Oh yeah.
You know, they're a very strong.
And peacock feathers.
Well, antlers are better because you can actually hurt someone with antlers.
Yeah.
But as a stag, you never really want to get to that point if you can help it.
And they have a
so
cost to
in
carry.
the end, it's like the biggest antlers.
Yeah.
And then they become an abstract symbol of let's not fight because I've got bigger antlers than you.
Yeah.
So there is a theory about that the physical world can lack violence due to some abstractions.
Now that's where Bitcoin's effective. So, like, I'll give you a wartime example that I was taught a long time ago, and I was being taught about the Falklands War, and there was a bombing run that the RAF did from the UK using a pyramid of refueling that they've actually published the diagram of. It was like the refueler being refueled by the refueler.
What, all flying at the same time?
No, in like a kind of coordination. So they'd synchronise so that one bird was in the air to fill up a jet, then it peeled away, another one came further along, and basically what it did, it produced this unsustainable, like you couldn't do 10 of these, attack on on a British runway that was occupied by an Argentinian fighter fleet. And it was a massive operation, ridiculous, and it strafed the runway with bombs. And one of maybe 10 in a run of bombs, one cratered near the runway. So it didn't actually do any particular, it's all right, like not particular damage to the base, but it was enough, this is the crucial part, it was enough strategically to convince the Argentine command to withdraw its fighter fleet because it was deemed at risk from distance. And so without any violence, where the maximum would have been to actually keep going on those bombing runs that were unsustainable, very expensive and not possible to do 10 of. And it chilled the issue at the start. And I think where Bitcoin unlocks denied areas of the economy, it has a second order effect in dissuading people from even trying to fiddle with this, that or the other part of a system. People who, if we leave the door open on systems where anybody can stand on a pipe and ruin millions of people's lives with a switch, they will do it more often. If you have a parallel system or a fallback position that is ever closer, they won't try in the first place. You will not enforce things in a fiat law if you're also aware that there's a NOSTR grievance procedure that people can just go to for free and have a better than average chance of being treated fairly. And it will actually improve the existing system. And Farage, going back to Farage, he got unbanked. And then he went onto the Bitcoin thing, and that's how he got in. It's from what's not working. And the reason he is now still banked is because it pushed him into circles and have conversation with Bitcoiners.
Well, wasn't it Coates and Co as well? They probably rebanked him because it was a terrible PR.
The CEO got sacked.
Yeah.
So these things that people can do to punch others, remember at the bottom of all this is bullying. And if you live by the sword, you die by it. And yeah, you can go out and you can do some naughty stuff and no one's going to stop you while you're doing it. But you don't own the consequences of breaking cover and doing something nasty to someone where 60 million other people see it and say, I wouldn't want to be treated like that, so why should he be treated like that? It draws the public attention to the wrong areas of what the state does and how it does it. And so that was a loss Because what did they get? They got the benefit of removing him from the system for 2 weeks until the news media turned it into a sacking of the CEO, gone, and he's back in the banks because it's political persecution. That was a good round for Bitcoin. It bounced him back to the ropes where he had to talk to all the freedom maximalists and say how terrible things are. And then it drew him back in because it wasn't able to enforce its move.
What do you think about all this cozying up to Bitcoiners by people in power now, politicians? Do you think they'd turn away as easily as they turned towards?
I think politicians as you see them are better not viewed as people. I know that sounds like dehumanizing. what I mean is, let me put it another way. I know that's
yeah,
but they're not.
Another way.
But they're not. And the reason is, first of all, you don't get their personal opinions ever. So what we get is an on-stage performance of something. That performance, let's say it's not an opera. Let's call it a news reporter interview with Nigel or with whoever, Keir Starmer. If you said that's not a person with his own opinions, he will stick to those opinions when pressed, and let's call them somebody who is paid and gets power from hitting the largest area of an audience. That's the game. So when we say, "Oh, what does he think of this?" That's not it. What these politicians do is they cast out ideas to an audience, and when the audience resonates with it, they get power. So to answer your question about Bitcoin and how they're cozying up to it, I think when a politician's suite of comments goes from anti-Bitcoin to neutral on Bitcoin, it does nothing to me to tell me what that person thinks about Bitcoin. What it tells me is the people that they are pitching to are being judged to be more receptive to Bitcoin. So when you see politicians adopting it or opening the door to it or talking about it, they're doing it in sympathy to their base. Their base is that more interested in it. Their base have rejected the idea it's a scam, and their base now think that it's somewhere between the standard to do commerce on and not a scam anymore. And if they don't adapt to that opinion, they become unpopular.
Do you think that politicians are different now? Do you think in the past they believed in something and then they hoped everyone followed, or do you think they've always pandered to the?
The politicians now have more power, so the state is a bigger percentage of our GDP. So it's a factor that's more important in politics now than it used to be. If you own the last 5% of our national defence and a few basics, you can enforce your ethics better. But what politicians now, modern politicians, have to do is be everything to everybody. Everything to everybody. Because that's the maximum jackpot. That is almost, if you get a UK Prime Minister, you've got 60 to 80% of the wealth being created in that society at your fingertips for the time that you run. And you've done it by promising people more than you can deliver. And it kind of works. So they just copy...
Until there's a revolution.
Until there's a revolution. Until
people
the lights
get too
go
pissed
out.
off. It's basically what happens.
Well, where are we now? We've got, in the UK, and actually most of the Western world, we've got an economic and a political majority in the baby boomers. All of a very tight grouping of preference and opinion. And will vote in their interest and will spend in their interests. And they've been the dominant force in society for the last 30, 40 years. So now they're retiring and getting sick. And the generation underneath them is much smaller. So it doesn't have the productive capacity to live a quality of life and have the excess over to pay for the baby boomers' healthcare, welfare, wars, and other expensive luxury opinions. And the difference has been stretched in debt. So where the young and the under generations haven't made or won't or can't make the wealth it takes for baby boomers to live like they've lived in their prime all the way through to their death, has been ballooned in debt. So we've not even got a stable demographic. We've got the majority of people in the UK retiring in the next sort of 10, 20 years. And they expect services that need money. And it's just not going to be there. There's just this bedraggled 18 to 35-year-old minority who can't affect things at the voting booth because there's not enough of them. or in economics because they've got no money. And they're being expected to pick up the future tab for this other generation. And the first time is going to be when they retire, is they're not the economic majority anymore, but they're still the political majority.
From what it looks like to me, and I use England as an example because that's where we are, but I'm sure it's happening everywhere, is slowly but surely the state is looting everyone.
Yeah, it's a farm.
It's run out of money, and slowly but surely it's just taking money because it doesn't produce anything.
Yes.
That's what's happening, right?
There's loads of horrible analogies for something like this, and they're all quite incendiary, but they're not untrue. It's like cancer. Like it's like a tumor that represents 60% of the kilogram weight of a body, and it absorbs nutrition and oxygen, and it splits cells and it repeats itself in a way that doesn't cap, and it serves no organic purpose to the whole. It is just a big biological cost to the body. Eventually the body dies, or the cancer dies. And there is something in this state and the size of it where it has no limitations. The bigger it gets inclines to be bigger again, like a bully. The bigger the bully gets off what it steals, the bigger it gets, therefore it can steal more. And the state's just been on this incredible run under the sort of apathy and lack of understanding of the people that support it, and bang pots outside at 8 o'clock at night, which is actually one of the scariest things as an adult I've ever seen. It actually terrified me.
Or heard. Really? Why? Yeah. It wasn't exactly the scariest people doing it.
It was terrifying to me.
Why? Go on.
Because it's such a basic movement, isn't it? Clonking pots.
I mean, the reason why it was being done was also really strange.
Well,
when you think about
to support the NHS.
I know, it was so hollow though. It was
but this is what I mean, right? So like, just if you were really like, I'm not that smart. So at 80 IQ level, right? You go along the street, and you're like, what's that noise? Why is everyone stood outside the front door banging their cooking pots together, right? And it's not a joke. Like, it's funny now, but at the time, I just thought this shit can go anywhere because you've got grown adults.
I know.
And it's the cacophony of banging cookware, right? And what for? It's set against this belief in an ultimate right to your health and your safety. And it's terrified me. I went and bought welding gas. When all that shit was kicking off, I just thought, right, we're in Munich, man. Like, these people will go and do anything at this point. They're so primed to do what they're told.
Yeah.
It's like a beehive that goes into like an emergency survival routine where it just goes ape, and that's what we'll have promised. I think it's just these mass madnesses.
Do you think that? So you think that on economic grounds, at some point in the future, everyone, everyone's going to, or not everyone, majority are going to end up like that?
Yeah, we're going.
They're going to be lynching people publicly.
No one's going to. As this plane's crashing, right, and we know that there's bits in our lives that are just not sustainable, and it's just like a relationship with an alcoholic relative. Like, and they know, they are not beating the odds at the bottle of that bottle, and this is a society that is addicted to the same degree an extreme alcoholic is addicted to alcohol, where they're so far from where they should be that to turn back is actually almost as dangerous as to keep going. And that's exactly where we are. Like, it's such a fine line between becoming sober and risking your life and the tremors and all the shit you do when you come out of alcohol. That is an uglier path for people politically than it is to just keep drinking. That's what's scary. And it's only scary because they're the majority. Demographics in economics is destiny. Like, so there's lots of bullshit that's spread around in economic forums, but if you just wanted to boil it down to something quick, it's demographics and your competitive advantage. That's it. And capital flows. And if you plot those things, they are the root things you'd measure before you form an economic opinion of anywhere. And when you look at the West, the demographic is top heavy. It trends towards older, sicker people. That is not good. There's no economics and there's no societal argument to be had under an umbrella of here's a majority of people who are going to become net consumers in the economy, having been the net producers in an economy, and nothing underneath to replace them. It's literally retiring without a pension.
Is that their fault?
Yes.
No, but I mean, is it their fault? Do they?
It's a collective. It's not your nan's fault.
But
right?
I mean, do they have the option to be any different? That's what I mean.
It's hard to. It's collective responsibility. So it's the amount of mess divided by the people involved in it, with a lot of fudge and I know a guy and he was a baby boomer and he's always been an anarchist and he's always fought against the state. I know. I'm not looking to single people out. That's not it at all. It's if we're making generalizations and we're looking at trends that involve more than one people, we speak in the general. And the general thing in the West are old, sick, low conviction citizens who are living at the expense of minorities on an increasing basis. And it's not linear. They're about to stop working. All the 50 to 60-year-olds who are at the peak and at maximum hourly rates and get the skills, and it's all built, that economy's all built around them for them. And just now, they're going to start retiring, trimming in, looking to sell houses. Who to? We don't know. And we're on the turn. But they'll still be able to vote.
Older than that, wouldn't they? Like, I'm 54.
What,
you think it's in the 55-year-olds,
retiring, yeah.
Really?
Absolutely.
Wow. What are they going to do?
Vote.
How much? Where have they got a load of savings then or something?
No, you vote. If you don't have savings, you vote. And there's still going to be a pervasive majority in that. That's the break, right? This is what's going to change. What's going to change and what's going to stay the same in our lifetime. The biggest generation in history has always been a net consumer and has always been subsidised by their own productivity, is about to not be productive.
Explain that. So are you talking about my generation? Like,
it depends what you generate. You might exfoliate and moisturise.
Well, no, I think about my mum and dad as being boomers.
Okay, so silent generation.
And they're in their 80s now.
All right, so baby boomers are...
What is a baby? Am I a baby boomer? 54. What does it mean?
Probably at the end of that, actually.
70,
the baby boom was after the Second World War, so all the survivors...
Yeah, that's my mum. Well,
right.
No, they were already alive.
It's not really to capture, give me your driving licence, date of birth, I'll tell you if you're part of this ugly set. It's to look at things in trends, and economics is allocating capital, and we had this very large generation after the war. This very large generation and a rash of productivity. It's affected everything. It's affected the forests I work on. The things that are planted were for fast, quick, now. And lots changed in the baby boom generation from the world they were born into the world I'm living in. The laws have eroded. Personal freedoms have gone down. Quality of life, life expectancy, fertility.
Have they gone down?
Down. They're going down.
Really? I thought we were living at the peak of our sort of existence, I mean, we probably are. It's probably a small little dip, but...
as the man falling down, having jumped out of a skyscraper, says, so far, so good. But what I mean is that, no, mate, fertility rates are crushed. Quality of life's down. And life expectancy. The boomers are the first generation to give a world to their children and grandchildren where they don't live as long as they...
So they were the high time preference. They were the first of the high time preference people.
Yeah,
because of the war.
Yeah, I mean...
They had to rebuild fast.
There'll be examples in history where, we've got Roman Empire rise and fall. We've got demonetization examples of that. We've got John Law, in terms of how the money fell apart. And the people that lived in that and benefited from it are kind of similar to the baby boomers. But it is a unique situation in that we do have quite an efficient democracy. It's not a good system, but it's recorded quite well. And the problem with it being so efficient is that it really does fall to who the baby boomers are and what they want. And if you're of a certain age, similar to most people, and you've got similar preferences and similar TV shows, they act like a lobby. And that would be fine if they were proportionate to the rest of society. But this generation, not from being right, wrong, or someone's fault, is just about 51% of how things happen. So when we have a novel flu go around the world, as a society, we react like the median person in that society. And the median person in society over COVID in a Western democracy was a slightly overweight, slightly middle-aged to getting older, closer to retirement than the start of their career, a lot less to play for,
banging a thing,
a lot more to lose, and just generally scared, right? Young people aren't scared of flu,
no.
But they got jabbed. And the way they got jabbed wasn't because it was in their interest, but it was because we had a vote. And the median voter, the median preference in society, the ones that kicked people out of supermarkets and made jobs impossible to do without this stuff, was about the age that you start worrying about a flu hitting you harder than a fucking flu.
No, you're absolutely right.
So if you take a median voter, which is the most commonly occurring type of voter, not the average, because we don't go on averages on democracy, we go on majorities. So a median is a better measure of central tendency. If we're trying to do quick estimates, it's to say the average voter as a median is got enough money to be scared of losing it, got a family that's big enough to care about what happens, but not so much that you take total responsibility for it. We talk about boomers. Loads of stuff, scared of losing it, and they know and act like they're in a majority, because they are. And that's what happens in society. It's the mass, it's the mob that enforce those things that are popular are the things that come through. And unfortunately for everybody who's not in that majority, you're the minority. And they don't need you to enforce what they do, but they do need you to pay for it, and they do need you to realise the losses of it. So if a healthy guy decides not to take a jab, they're ostracised. And if they do decide to take it, sorry mate, I know that heart condition is completely debilitating and avoidable, but it's all right because we've got free health. Just join the queue. It's take a ticket, 5 hours. And it's not our fault because legal reasons.
The reason that a lot of people took the jab was to save grandma as well. I mean, that was literally that's the way they that's where they focused it, like you say.
It's odd. It's an odd justification though, because you've just saved the last 10 years of a woman's life or a loved one's life, and you've done it by risking the death or crippling of someone with 70 years.
More than that, there's much better ways of doing that. Don't
Not
go
if
out.
you're
No, grandma, don't go out. That's what I told my mum. I said, look, are you really scared of COVID? And
Well,
if you are, you can literally press a button on your computer and food arrives at your door. You can do the whole world is set up for you not to want to go out. You don't have to expose yourself.
But it's your preference.
Yes.
But if you've got a minority preference, it's crushed. If you've got a majority preference, it's enforced. That's democracy. And it doesn't just work at the voting booth, it works in the societal zeitgeist. We went through, in an extreme, an enforced world that was optimised around about a 65-year-old who's got a pension. That was the perfect for them. Stay at home, and your restaurants are subsidised, but you stay at home because you're big enough in your hierarchy to make living out of your box in your house viable and probably get more money. And you don't like commutes anymore because you're not that, you know what you know. It completely clipped a much more fitted suit around the average voter. And it wasn't voted on, but it was enforced societally because most people in the village sort of liked being locked in. It was like a day off at school when the pipes burst. And they're like, yeah, well, I've still got my mortgage and I'll still pay it off because this company let me remote in.
Well, and then a load of free money came through the door as well.
But guess who died? The working man. You can't go out. Why? I fix pipes. I put electrical stuff in. No, that's not a key worker. Oh, great. Okay. Am I only a key worker at the end of the tax year then? Yeah, because you pay for all the key workers. Well, if I pay for all the key workers, aren't I the key worker? Well, yeah, but that won't be borne out in truth for 5 years. So the argument today is you stay at home, and if not, get the police in. And if you moan about it on social media, we'll spike that. And then all the things that were argued about and enforced during that period of crisis have turned out to be true. The origin of the virus, the lack of effectiveness of masks, the total insanity of lockdowns, the total insanity of vaccinations that didn't have tests and have no legal basis and were issued under emergency use. That was insanity, and it only suited one section of society. that looks niche until you check the demographic table. And then you go, fuck, mate, this is half the voting base. And it's at least half of the economy, because that's where everyone owns their assets, stocks, bonds, and houses are all with people who've kind of hit their prime 5-10 years ago. And are like gliding out and are about to retire. But the problem is they've not all put money aside for themselves that they think. They've got £500,000 to £1 million house. Everyone's going to sell their houses at the same time to fund their retirement. And it's all done on debt. And there's no one to buy them.
It's interesting. That's just happened to someone in my neighbourhood.
So they decided to sell because their cost of living was higher than they'd planned for. And then they go to the market, they don't get the price they want, they go down 20%.
No, they didn't sell. This is the thing. I think this is another another quality of those kind of people is if their house was worth $1 million and now it's only worth 600, they won't sell. They'll go, no, because all they've ever known is, it'll be, it's worth $1 million though. It's worth $1 million.
There's two examples of other asset holders that suffer the same problem. One is the old-fashioned lords, like the old Lord of Berkshire or whatever. Cash poor. There's a great mini-series from 20 years ago called, I think it's called Meet the Fucking Burtons or something. It's something like that. Meet the fucking someone.
No, the fucking Fulbrights.
Something like that, yeah.
My friends, they run a party at their mansion.
Right.
Every year.
And it got huge...
Fulfords.
It's something like that.
Fulfords.
The fucking Fulfords. And they're like, every second word's a fuck. They're incredibly interesting people. But their life consisted of rinsing a £10 million estate for pennies to pay for the roof and pay for the electric, right?
Yeah.
So that's one example, is this asset-rich, cash-poor. Where else can we see examples of that without having to argue it theoretically? One is like lords, old landowners that are subject to tax, and the other one's farmers. Same thing, right? Just had their capital gains cranked. 2 days after that, farmer takes himself out and shoots himself. So these are the two areas. This is
what I mean, though, about this is happening because of the looting of people.
Well, where does the violence yield the most? Farmers are a minority at the voting booth. They're not loved, they're not respected, and they have assets that can be liquidated readily. So they, of course, are subject to inheritance tax. There's loads of places you can just move the goalpost. Landlords are a good one. So someone in the property boom buys 5 houses, remortgages and buys 10. Then the law changes. Now you're not allowed to claim your bank interest back against your landlord loans. That changes the business model. And now everybody who was running in to rent is now running out to liquidate as the tenant laws get stricter, where the tenant has stronger property rights than the landlord, and the landlord's costs and their business model was changed at the DNA level. And it creates huge liquidations. So you get these big breeds in assets and the big breeds out, changing on the rules. And the boomers aren't going to be any different from that. They've not got enough money collectively to pay for the next 20 years of their life. And their error term is to put it on the subsequent generations. It's not a matter of will. There's 2-3 boomers and their needs for every productive taxpayer in society, as things are. There's not enough people to throw into a collectivist economy to pay for what's already assumed to be had in this generation. So it's a hell of a place to open up a business to me.
No, but what do you think is going to happen then? Like the only obvious result is a default, isn't it?
Yeah.
And well, you like I hate to say it, but a reset, a great reset of some description.
Yeah, man.
But what form does that take? Is it an inflationary or a Bitcoin standard?
No, there's two. There's two
Bitcoin
ways.
And gold or inflation.
Right. It's an unsustainable situation. Right. It cannot exist in the same place in space and time forever. This where we're in. It will go somewhere, right? It's like a cake baking. You can't unbake it, and you can't leave it in there forever. It's temporary, right?
Is that your own anecdote?
I suppose it is. Just made it up.
It's like,
but it's like
never
that, right?
Heard you explain
but what I mean is, we can't. It's not a physical reaction. It's a chemical reaction. It's something that is. It started, and its end is not there yet, and we can't keep things the same. And in money, it's inflation or deflation. They're your options, and both tracks peel away from what you thought you were going to get, which was always a lie because it's paper, and it will go inflation and all the way back to zero, where the tokens aren't just worth anything, or it'll go deflation, where the tokens are scarce because you're starting to pay debt with the open amounts of cash that kept the economy liquid. And there's not enough cash to cover the debt pile. I don't mean not enough cash like, we can't make ends meet. I mean there isn't enough dollars total in the system to pay the debt off, not even by a third. By the time you've got into the first third of your debt pay down, there is not a single brass cent in the economy to buy milk. They're the two ways out. That's where it gets to.
What does that look like for somebody earning 40 grand a year?
Terrifying, because it's like breathing without feeling like you're running out of breath.
What would you advise them to do? Like, how do they, say you're working, I think the median wage in the UK is about 35 or 40,000 a year, right? Say you're living in a house, you've got £1,000 a month mortgage, your two kids. What do you do to future-proof yourself?
Get philosophy. Like, just read the Bible or something. I don't know what to get. I don't know advice.
Read the Bible.
I don't know, mate. It's not a good position to be in.
There must be something. I mean, you would probably say, you might not even say that, but sell your house, put it into Bitcoin.
I wouldn't give advice to someone like that. I wouldn't give that advice. It's probably the right thing for them to do, but it's giving the advice, it has an observer effect. It achieves usually the opposite. This is a triage situation. There's casualties that won't be reached, and it's ugly. It's ugly stuff. It's intimidating, and you're down to this. It sounds gross, but you're down to hope, and you're down to courage, and trying to do the right thing, and trying to really work hard on what the right thing is.
But I mean, if you look at other countries that have been through inflationary times recently, like Argentina, they're coming out the other side, aren't they?
Yeah, but only after they realised the full whirlwind of ignoring it.
But they did live through it.
They lived through it. Well, some people live through it, mate. I mean, there is a survivorship bias and all this stuff. Like, there's a lot of people buried in the ground that aren't going to vote next year, that definitely suffered for the decisions of the state and continue to. And it doesn't have to be a big bang, and it doesn't have to be a big revolution. We can just rot. We could just sit and rot. The way things went over COVID felt like an open nursing home. It felt like the nursing home model turned inside out and became the public. That's what it felt like. It felt like being in an open air nursing home with rules that didn't exist before and conditions for things that don't exist outside. I don't see any reason why, if there's a majority of people that will have that done, that can enforce it. But what was different about COVID, and will be different in the next crisis, is that the people who are politically ubiquitous, the people that can win votes, are not also the people that produce the value and tax the system. They're now claimants, net. They're not also the biggest taxpayer, but they're going to want stuff, and the main taxpayer is not going to want it. They're not going to want to fund pensions that weren't on the books. They're not going to want to fund interest on debt for things that have been eaten and consumed by another generation.
But
triple the defence budget.
Do they even get a say in that, though?
Well, this is what's interesting, because now something has to break. The productive economy has an incentive of one thing, and the democratic system has an incentive to the other. And that will be a bigger fight than when both groups were the same, because you can enforce in economics what you agree in politics while you're both. But as a generation that has to retire and wants to retire, they're losing the veto power of the economy. They're asking you to do it, and you have an option. You either go with it or you don't, or you square the circle and you do a bit of it. In China, the young people there just don't work. They've got a phrase for it: lie flat. So, like, unemployment in China, youth unemployment super high. All the baby boomers still very productive, still think everything's fine. The young are saying, well, I'm just not going out the door. I'm not working that hard for this little, so I'm just going to stay flat.
That's kind of happening here.
Yeah.
Since COVID, people are not going back to work, you know, or just not doing low paid jobs because
what's the point if if 60% of your burger flipping time is given back to people you never meet, not the same age as, and don't agree with on most things? You're a slave.
She's licking my toe, by the way.
He's licking your toe. You must have a nice tasty.
What the hell is on there? Sorry, go on.
Must be something tasty on there. He's just getting a bit fed up.
I know. Lie down. Come on, this is interesting.
But I know it's all quite cynical, and it can be considered divisive because you're comparing one generation to another, but that's economics. Look, you can't have a system that runs on majority vote and then not make generalizations about the nature of those voters as categories and preferences. It's how it's been. The boomers have had their political wishes granted, and they were terrible ideas. They were abandonment of principles, abandonment of solid money, abandonment of freedom, and a sense of fair play. And now they want everyone to pay for them when they become the least productive.
I don't think I've heard anyone frame it like that. Frame it as, I know that it's framed in general as that, but not that it was a generation. It happened in one generation kind of thing.
All it is.
I mean, are we talking since 71? Is this another what the fuck happened in 1971?
Look, we can pull up some accurate census data of these countries, and you'll see that, like, the median person in the UK is about 55, 60.
I didn't even know that. No. Why don't I see more people everywhere like me then? Maybe I'm looking in the wrong places.
You probably do.
Yeah. How old are you?
I'm coming up for 40.
Really?
Yeah. Why? How old do you think I was?
I don't know. I don't know how old anyone is. I don't really assign. I've never felt much different since my late 30s.
Just because if I'm meeting a 60-year-old British bloke, right, and they're a Bitcoiner and all the rest of it, I don't think boomer.
Good.
You know what I mean? It's collective responsibility. It's if you do things in a movement that achieved a group aim, you're not individually responsible, man. But you are responsible to the degree divided by the number of people that went along or went for this preference or cared conveniently less about something in terms of medical freedom when it was in their interest not to care, or they secretly liked the idea that everyone's getting a lick of the same paint.
So what do you think they should have done at that moment? Should they have thought to themselves, been a bit more humble, I've had a good run, let's do this for the youngsters? Would that have been the correct response? As
an individual, you've got to take the animosity out of it. I don't have value judgments against individual boomers. We're trying to look into the future and make plans, and we're looking at a future that's volatile. And diagnosing it is about taking the data and characterizing it and seeing what in that information picture can we use to make decisions. And the age split on demographics, particularly now, is quite stark. And it can be used to explain how we got to where we have got to in the lifetime of these people. And therefore it can be used to make fairly good estimates about what's going to happen from this point forward. That's all. It's not, therefore, the boomers, we all need to go out and give them a bad time. No, we do not need to do that. But we can plan around the tides, and we can plan around the sun, and we can plan around a generation that is heavy in its age brackets and its preferences, which is big. It's big. The split between that age bracket economically and the rest is stark. It's not linear. And the amount of those people, which is the nominal root of democracy, is the number of hands that go up in favour or against something, is also a majority of this age bracket. So at a minimum, they draw my attention. And they can be used, you can overweight them in their preferences to expect what you could see from the public while they are so big. But they're not around forever. And they're changing constantly. When they were young, it was free sex, free drugs, smoking weed at the festivals. 70s, harder drugs. Normalisation of divorce, start of it. Repudiation of religion. This was the atheist start, right? 80s, secure the bag, get the job, straighten out, marry the girlfriend, get the mortgage, securitise everything. That was Thatcher era, pushing on to Tony Blair era. the luxury socialists. I secured my bag when Thatcher was in. Most of the mortgage is paid off. Now I'm going to be generous with everybody else. Yeah. And now it's now we've all secured the bag and we're not scared. We've been rich. We've had free sex, free drugs. We broke all those rules. Then we secured the bag with small government. Now we're going to give it all up to the globalists because our habitat is secure. We can give the rest away. And the kids can get babysat while we go on holiday. You know, it's this kind of stuff. And now where are we with this gang? 2000s, total loss of right and wrong as a result of all the other principles that kind of got eroded and undermined, right? And now it's like, what the fuck is gold-backed money? Doesn't even, what is that? That must have been in between my weed days and my heroin days to the booms, right? And now it's like, we'll just let it run. You know, let it run. We're going to be the informal grandparent generation. We're going to be the skateboard over the back. We blew it. We gave everything away after we ate what we could. And now we're all sick. So we got to look after us because the massive one is we put in, so we take out. It's like, hang on. Yeah. In your lifetimes, collectively, boomers, you went from from surpluses and manufacturing economy, right, to massive national debt that's double or triple the size of our defence budget, our ability to fight for our place in the world. 3 times that budget, 3 times that amount to pay soldiers and buy guns. 2 to 3 times of it is the interest-only element of the debt that's been run up since the 60s. Right? And you see an arc of a human being. You see the end of the war, freedom, everything. Well, the war's won, everything's fine. Now we can relax. We need materials, we need quick stuff, we need plastics, we need gadgets. The economy's open again. We don't have to make bullets, we can make toys, we can make gizmos, convenience items, consumer goods. Now we get to computers. That's making things easier, making things more efficient. And the states grew alongside this apathy. It's always grown alongside it. And we're at the end of this arc. 50, 60, 70, 80. They're not around and they're not going to vote that way. And they're different from when they started. Like I said, it's a good movie that'll show you like the way the arc of a boomer would be Forrest Gump, believe it or not. When you see the points of his life that he goes along, Vietnam War and the anti-war, these boomers, they're not anti-war anymore. They're Ukraine flags in the front garden and banging pots. So they've changed.
They're very collective, aren't they, as well?
Well, you would be collective if you were part of a set of preferences where you're the majority. Everything you think is true because you can just enforce it with money. But also,
I think one of the reasons people are collective is because they're not competitive. I think that's a very natural response to being not very competitive.
Natural is the right word because where in nature are things not competitive? It's when there's more resources than there are animals and it's open. There's an unlimited amount of space to move into. And we're at the end of that with these boomers. They made an economy for themselves, served themselves quickly, put it on a tab, some of it. And the rest, we're going to have to bear the full cost of their lives to the degree they've not saved for themselves, plus the debt of what they've consumed along the way.
All right, describe the person who will see out this next, say, 25-year period successfully.
I don't think it's in the control of anybody.
No, but who's positioned well, for example? I was trying to find out if you had any advice. So you haven't. So
I'd stay away from
positioned
advice,
well?
right?
Who's positioned well? Describe the person who's positioned well for the next part of history. You can use yourself if you want.
I'd avoid that.
I mean, are you positioned well, do you think?
We'll find out, won't we? Like, that's how I feel about it, is that like everybody's got to make their own preparations as best they can. And I know that sounds like quite a foreboding thing to say, but it's just to take a fact that like we've lived I've come up for 40s, you know, like things have been quite stable. Even when they've been unstable in predictable ways. And I don't think we can enjoy that in this next section. It's to acknowledge what we don't know and to acknowledge that the volatility we've saved ourselves and the stress and hardships we've saved ourselves are being stored up for something, and it will come back, and it will come back unfairly, and it will come back unevenly. And it's better to just not try and think that you can make a plan that indemnifies you completely against your environment But to accept some of it as the cut and thrust of a normal human life, to make conflicts and to get into scrapes and try and survive. Most stuff you try and do, if it's too easy to the point you don't think you're risking much on it, it's not fulfilling. And if you push too hard and you're reckless, you're probably, not really taking into account how dangerous things are going to get. And it's just to bed in and sort of say, there are situations when we keep continually compounding and doing stupid shit where the choices we have after that are all worse than the choices we had 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And I think we're there. I wouldn't give advice at the moment. I just wouldn't. But I wouldn't say I'm completely despondent. I think there's always a best thing to do, but you've got to kind of leave that 1 out of 6 on the dice to things just not going your way, getting caught up in something or being particularly affected by something as an individual more than your share. And that's totally okay. And actually, by the way, that's how most of the world lives. We've just been kind of protected from it for a while. So it's just to kind of brace a little bit for sort of anything. And volatility is volatile. If you can guess that something's going to be volatile, you can prepare for it better than having a definition of what will happen in its exactness. If you know it's just going to be generally uncertain, you can make decisions that expose you positively to general uncertainty. Just be more sensible, be a bit more self-sufficient. I think that it starts with everybody about coming back to having an identity. I think whether you've got 40 grand a year or £1 million a year, everybody has a sense of emptiness if they haven't got an authentic identity. And I think that no matter what position you are in life, you need to go back to what you are and define it and decide in advance what you're prepared to do to be loyal to that and what you're prepared to do to change or that you won't defend. And that's a mindset that's free to get. It has to be authentic and it can carry you a very long way. It sounds like shit advice, but that is actually a really doable thing. And it's always improving. And then at least when you make mistakes or the world's unfair, at least you're doing it along an authentic arc where your actions are what you feel. And you're doing it at a scale that's risky and hard. You've already won, no matter what happens.
Isn't that what Jordan Peterson would call the meaning in your life?
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, I think he's captured a good section of what I'm talking about. Is that people drift when you adapt collectively to a thing that you're not really sure about, it's just where everyone else is going. You've robbed yourself of your identity. And a quick way is just to get back to what are you scared of? What do you care about? We've done it. What scares the shit out of you individually is normally a good indicator of what you need to work on next. And if it's a general sense of unease, work on a general sense of preparedness. If it's a specific thing that you're not gripping, focus on it. And in the focusing of it, you either realise it's not that big of a deal because you've looked into it and it's not a big deal. Or it is, and you've got to adapt to it. And that can fit into any walk of life, from whatever station in politics or whether you disagree or agree with anything of what I've said. Do it from an identity. Where you were born, who did you grow up with, what are your experiences, what are you weak on, what do you think you're competitive on. That's a good start, because then no matter what happens out there, you don't need to pre-plan it and you don't need to be a future teller. You can always respond to it authentically. And that's a personal thing. And that's why the advice doesn't carry very well, because it's just me doing what I think is best. I wouldn't go as far as to say what someone else should do. But they're my notes. That's the demographic picture. That's the sort of situation we're in. And here's the tech coming to help. And here's what I'm going to try and do, negotiate it in my life. And it might go terribly.
Yeah, but I think it was Jordan Peterson that said that the meaning carries you through any situation. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because if
that's right.
If you're doing something for a reason,
yeah,
the result is actually not as important as the meaning, because if it doesn't work, you're still going to carry on doing it. But if you don't have the meaning, you're probably going to feel victimized by it. You're probably going to give it up. You're probably going to...
Right. The sweet spot on anything you're doing is where it matches your values and you're not quite sure you're going to achieve it. And the reason that your values are important to define are because halfway through that effort, you're going to have a crisis where you think it's going to fail. And if you only got motivation and you've only got the momentum of the decision, like I started so I'll finish, it's not enough to screw the nut. And what happens is when all the motivation's evaporated and you're knackered and there's not another coffee in the pot and there's not another voice of encouragement and there's not another bit of money that you find under the sofa and everything's down to zero, the one thing that drives through the target is remembering why you started. And if your reason for starting isn't root level identity, like to not do this is a betrayal of who I am as a person, you won't finish it. So as long as what you're doing is authentic and genuinely you, and it's within your perceived abilities to achieve, but not guaranteed, it don't matter where you're starting from. That's the arc. You get satisfaction. Even if you fuck up, at least it's honest. And you normally get, even on a failure, you still get a load of stuff that's real in the feedback because you put your real opinions out there and tested them. And that's the way to go about this. And then get unlucky along the way. People get unlucky every fucking day. The only people that survive it are the ones that come on with us on podcasts. There's a load of dead people that tried this and they haven't got the counter argument to make. There's a survivorship bias in this, but it is also just the way to keep going.
Well, if you think about it, you don't have any other. It's the best option anyway. It is the best.
You're dying
option.
Anyway.
Well, it's the best option because you could fail or you could not, and if you fail, that's beside the point.
Exactly.
What's left when you do succeed or you do fail?
Yeah.
What's left? Because that's the thing that you'll have to contend with.
It's failing up, right? So like you set off and you've got an overly ambitious. You're a 22-year-old. You've got an overly ambitious dream, right? And you find when you apply your will to it that you find yourself wanting, and you end up not being the person that started off. And you develop as a character. But if you get small and carry easy targets and go with the flow, you've not lived. You've just gone along. And if you're extreme and you never took account of your limitations and you never were able to negotiate your limitations to an achievement and win, you haven't lived to the top potential in your life. So it's to strike that middle, to have stuff that's not reckless, but it's not cowardly. And that's a humble thing, but it's also ambitious. Because you've got to say to yourself, I'm not sure. There's got to be some element of this where someone or something can kick the whole board over while I'm trying. And that's the fucking in the price. If you're not up for that, if you're not up for being treated unfairly by life or by other people, don't bother. Don't bother. That's got to be part of your decision, is to just say, and I can fail, and I could try. I could have the best odds of doing something by how hard I try, and I can still be unlucky and fail at it. It's probably a good judged target to try and hit.
The likelihood of failure is priced into all successes.
Yeah, you've got to, because otherwise, if you fail and a reason that's not your fault, you'll get bitter. And you'll go, there's no point. Like, I did everything right there, and I still got my chips taken off me.
What I mean is the likelihood of failure is priced into all the great successes, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, without it, there's no
visceral.
great success.
It's visceral. You'll never, ever forget a moment when you see someone risking and being vulnerable for an achievement. It's in your bones. The one I haven't even got it hung up yet, but it's one of the strongest memories I've got is a guy called Rolly Free, and he's riding a 1952 Vincent Black Shadow, okay? And he's trying to break the land speed record after the war on the flats. And he's riding in a traditional pose in leather, and he's not hitting the top speed that the bike can achieve. So he strips down to his underwear and he surfboards himself. He lays flat, his stomach's on the seat, and he breaks the fucking land speed record in swimsuit because he's more efficient, right? Now, if he comes off, there'll be bits of him everywhere. But as an image, as an inspirational image, in black and white, a man saying, look how fucked up I'm exposing myself to get what I want. It was the only route through for that guy. He wasn't going to do 4 more runs on leathers and keep himself safe. He wanted the fucking win enough to risk his life to that point. And we all get it because it's a best-selling portrait. In black and white, that guy putting it all out. and it's ballsy and it's inspirational. It's not reckless because he was alive after it, and he got the fucking record, didn't he? So that's the level. I'm not saying everyone needs to go and ride motorbikes around naked, but for that guy at that time, he was willing to push it, and a tyre could have gone, and we'd have never heard of him. But that's kind of like, you're never going to be a better person in your own head than when you're doing something like that. And it's hard because if you push too far, you'll get wrecked. And if you don't push far enough, you'll live in regret. And that, that's anything to individuals listening. Whatever that feels like to you on your arc, do it. Because that's the best advice I could give, because it fits everybody at any level. If you're scared of spiders, there's something in there courageous for you. And if you've got something really big, like a big vision that you can't get out your head, and you feel like you've got the resources and the judgment and the wisdom, putting it all on the side is cowardice.
Isn't that as well? That is. Jordan Peterson keeps coming up. I don't know why. Dwelling at the boundary of order and chaos. That is.
He's over the target, but he's verbose, isn't he? I lose it with him.
Well, yeah. Nowadays it's a bit grinding, but when he was doing the kind of the religious series on YouTube and stuff like that, like I remember hearing him say about the sort of the boundary between order and chaos and living there, and really viscerally understanding it. And I've looped back round to that in a number of really long form conversations I've had with people as well, that you end up back at that point where it's like, you need to dwell at the border of order and chaos. And they was literally words that he said. Yeah. And I don't know why I'd never heard them before, but there was a couple of these.
They're the strongest words in our language.
But it's also antithesis of what the boomer generation would say. Same with the other one that always stuck with me from Jordan Peterson, which we spoke about earlier, is that, don't look for happiness in your life, look for meaning.
That's right.
Because happiness is not applicable in many situations.
Yeah, that's right.
But meaning will carry you through happiness, sadness, joy. And he was the first person I ever heard say both of those things, order and chaos and meaning.
Some of the best stuff in my life is, at the time, most miserable or like the most ridiculous. Because as long as you're on your line, that I am who I am, and I believe that, and I'm where I'm meant to be, and I believe that. And sorry, the fly, just like that fly on the mic. Sorry, that made everyone jump.
That was like Kohan. It was like you got the flow with a pair of chopsticks there.
Yeah, I got him. He's had a great day. That guy. But yeah, like it's not about extra levels of comfort or extra levels of security. I think that's a mistake you see in Bitcoiners more often than average, is this belief that you just need to get to a bunker, or you just need to get to the other side of the moon, or push your gold chips into a magic square that no one can take. And some of this is bringing it all back a little bit. Like, we've got better at putting property to one side and keeping it safe. That's all to the good. It limits the incentive to steal from us. But you're never going to be in an area of absolute safety. And when you get there, it's the shittest place you've ever been in your whole life. It's quiet, it's cold, no one cares about you. You haven't got a reason to get up in the morning because no one needs you, because you're just a node that runs off the air. It's not a place in life. It's like the side of the pool, It's nice to know it's there, but it's not a place to hang out if you've gone to go swimming. You got to get into the mix of it. It's balance. That's what I try and say. It's like, I'm not saying generally people should be more courageous or reckless. I'm just saying you've got to find the middle of something that you can do and do it. All that Jordan Peterson stuff as well, I would say, and you might agree, the doing of it, the practical application of the ideas is the value, not the theoretical white paper way of thinking that then you abandon whenever you've got a real problem in your life, right? Like, this is the proof of work stuff coming through. If you work on your identity and you confront yourself with hard questions, you will get the benefit of it, just like you would hash away for a block and eventually get the benefit of that. It's pro rata. If you don't think about yourself and you don't think about your accountability and you don't think about how you're seen because you don't think you need to be, You're aiming for a small life with very limited possibilities. But when you win in these middle grounds and you get somewhere you didn't expect, the opportunities multiply. And it is nothing to do with the environment you're in. You can be in a deteriorating environment, becoming increasingly capable as an individual to confront and engage with problems that you see. And the more time you work on it, the better your judgment and wisdom and ability to get across a problem is. And it's in the work that people avoid. It's about going from diagnosis to prognosis and not crying at the situation like the first 90% of the interview was, but to say that's the pitch. There's no point saying it's right or wrong. There's no one to point at. That's the situation you're born in. Some people are born in a plague. Some people are born in Gaza. Some people are born with illnesses and disabilities and no fucking hope whatsoever of having a good quality of life. So life's fucking tough, all right? And we're not due a painless, freedom by principle life. It's get back in the ring, get back into the real world, and do to your level of scale at your risk what you think is best. And that's hard. That involves being vulnerable, risking loss, risking injury, but it's a more satisfying route through any situation than trying to make it easier and hope for a more fair situation as it's dealt out the pack.
I think that's earlier when you were talking about the aspects of Bitcoin in the digital realm and what the equivalent in the physical realm. I think proof of work is at the core of that.
Yeah, it is.
It's the teaching from the digital realm, which manifests in the real world and is connected. Ironically,
yeah,
it is the connection between the two.
It is connected, and it's connected in a literal way. It's connected through the electricity supply.
Exactly.
Right. So we already have a.
But I mean, philosophically, it's something you can learn from Bitcoin.
Yeah, you can.
That when you apply it in your real life, you realise it's everywhere. Everything's a proof of work, or
not.
Right.
You can see through things that have substance to people who don't understand the definition of Bitcoin technically or economically. Can't see through scams. Can't see where they're being taken from because they don't know what they've lost. It's like a lobotomy. So this idea of working on yourself and asking questions of yourself and constantly putting yourself in to stress testing situations can only be to the good, as long as they don't break you and as long as you're not so reckless that you lose your thread. You stay in the mix, learn more about yourself. That is exactly the hashing function of a human, is to constantly go back to the mine and constantly keep putting units of effort in and keeping a track of the results. And it's not as smooth a return profile as mining. You get some wins, you get some losses, but as long as you're directionally going in the right place and you're changing your errors and you're changing the way you respond to stuff for better outcomes and more capability and more power, more reach, more contacts, more friends, and more understanding, then you're actually discounting all the problems you see in the world because you're better equipped to meet them. You see? So you can't just store Bitcoin and pray every night for a better world where we can realize millions of dollars of abstract wealth into a real economy and just hope someone else does the tidying up. It's the mess it is, and it's critical, and it feels like it's all about to kick off, and it might, but you just got to make your peace with that.
It is I think from a personal perspective, I think as well in this is the age of the proof of work. Yeah. This is the age we're going into. It's the age where work matters, really, against all else.
Do you feel like the light's gone back on in a dark room where, like, everything that Bitcoin touches or measures it honestly, and everybody's been used to sort of making up what things are worth, or right, and the scoreboard's
we're discovering what
right
is the value in work. We're discovering what the work is valued at as well.
It's also pricing it properly, because a 22-year-old should be working on their fitness and maintaining that. And it's not clear normally in a fiat economy that you're giving something away until after you've lost it. Whereas in Bitcoin, everybody knows the feeling about not buying Bitcoin soon enough, because it's just a matter of checking the chart against what you could have bought in 2011 that you now can't.
Sorry, I didn't wear the camera.
Sorry, no, I just took my top off and just blocked you. Yeah, so, there's an accountability arc coming into the world on Bitcoin while it's at peak drunkenness in terms of how it makes its decisions. And it's way above me to decide how that actually goes down. But there's a frame you can take through it that is fulfilling enough to enjoy, agnostic to what actually happens, and is actually, in any case, the right thing to do. And it's not about running away and hiding, like Fallout, like the Volties. And it's not about running headlong into it and being confrontational to it and throwing out things that keep life stable. And it's just about trying to divide the middle.
That's brilliant, mate. This is the 3 rules for life.
Yeah.
We're in an arc of accountability. The meaning is the frame.
Yeah.
And proof of work is and
it's back on the menu.
Yes. Yeah.
Because now the light's gone back on, the scoreboard's back on the pitch.
Yeah.
And everybody's been breaking the rules and it's not being reflected, or it's been pushed into another cost base, is now like, no. Like when you work for this, you get it paid back.
3 rules for life.
It's quite good, actually. It's quite good.
Dude, it's like what was it? Jordan Peterson's was 12 rules for life, isn't it? That's 3 rules for life.
But that's not bad, because anybody, like, whether you're a new listener or you listening in with a critical approach, right? Like, Free Cities sounds a bit whatever, I'll give it a try. It's just to say there's people in the middle of this that aren't extremely different minded to you and aren't as extreme or off the map as you think, and it's relative. Like, we are at the extremes of state power here, and Free Cities will stand out relatively as a gap in point of view between that and...
I think the most important thing to understand in all this is at least to start with the idea of top-down versus bottom-up, or centralised versus decentralised, because free cities are what they are due to decentralisation, same as many other things.
Well, some
if
are.
you can have but what I mean is, in the theory, if you have a top-down procedure, it tends to, like I say, it tends to become a tumour.
Yeah.
And I think probably free cities will become tumours in the end. But the point is, if you have a number of competing ones in a decentralised fashion, then it doesn't matter what happens. You just need the decentralised. And we're at, like you say, we're at peak centralisation, arguably. I don't know whether it probably could get worse.
Well, it's high watermark. Like, the line could keep going up. Like, I don't think today is the day where the state starts to recede. It's not today. It might not be for years. But I know it can't stay where it's staying sustainably, because it doesn't have the food on the farm to eat at its rate for decades. Something's got to give. There's either got to be a lot less people who claim, or there's got to be a lot more people to claim from. And you don't have to be a genius to see that the biggest generation's been feeding itself on a bit of a bar tab, and the party behind might morally be the ones expected to take it up, but in the numbers, they're expected to do the work of 10 of the people who've had their fun and ate the savings and added to the debt. It's not to point fingers and blame them, it's to just take acknowledgement of the fact the economy isn't linearly divided by age. We've got extremes, and we've got high concentrations of preferences that add up to quite a lot of power, and I'm just in behind that, with far fewer rights and a lot less upside, with something still correct to do. And it's not unfair. Like, I'm not saying we're the victims. It's not unfair, because life's unfair to everybody all the time. Every day in the news you can click on something where someone has just had something they are not deserving of bad. That's fucking life, right? So I'm not bitter about it, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to play my hand in appreciation of what I know or what I believe about the way things are going to turn around. In my life, it's just been about taking the things that you rely on most and just seeing if you can change them and take more responsibility for them. And the things that you can't take responsibility for because they're the limit of your skill or the limit of your resource, you've got to accept. That's kind of on someone else, Sam. It's kind of up there. It's you've got to accept it. You might be able to influence it, But most people that try and control things that they have to accept don't control things that they can. They abdicate things like health and the way they think in their own heads as just things that happen to them. And it isn't. You can control how you react to something. You can control how you respond, what you choose to say or not say. You've got control.
That is freedom, in fact.
That is, but freedom is it's a neutral good. It's the freedom to do harm. Free will is the freedom to do harm and the freedom to do good.
But I mean, your freedom is the way you respond to
your
things.
Agency.
No, but I mean, like, the most classic example of that is Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, or living in a concentration camp, the most unfree place you can live. But being choosing every single thing, choosing the way you respond to all these things that happen.
The response is more important than the event. The event just sets the stage for how you want other people to react to what's happening to you, good or bad. Is that you've got a choice. You've always got a limit of range of agency to set how you respond to it. And that's where you don't need a political movement to be free. You can just start by being honest with yourself and affecting the things that you have to control, have to influence, and have to accept. And a lot of the stuff we talk about is in that big old area called accept. And you see a lot of people trying to control things that they should be accepting and accepting things that they're capable of controlling.
That's a meme going around at the moment, isn't there? You can just code. You can just...
Yeah, vibe coding and all that.
You could just be
manifest.
Free. No, but you can just be free. It's a good one because you can. You can choose it in the moment. You can choose freedom in any moment. It's not easy in every moment.
Well, any choice you're given is an element of freedom. Like anything you decide to do under your own power is you're exercising your agency. But the bit people don't think are working on is like you can only be as free as you're authentic to yourself. You can't spin up a fake person who can't do things that you say you can and lie and get by and live a good life in your own head. You can't do that. So everybody has the freedom to be honest about who they are and what they're good at and what they're bad at and have a plan for themselves. That's freedom already. And yeah, like that's a good point is even if this goes into the gulag closed state system, those systems are riddled with people who still live authentic, interesting lives and did the right thing inside of the limitations of their lives. And
they're already doing it. I mean, we're all living inside limitations,
We sometimes can't point at the stuff we've got as the freedom end of a political spectrum, but we do have an awful lot of individual agency. We're limited, and those limits have gone up in ways that are public, but no one's controlling what I feel about stuff. They can influence it, but ultimately the better I am at controlling my emotions and judging things and making decisions, the less effective that is, even if they get better at it.
Or even if you track it back far enough, your ability to accept, which is a really like foundational principle in reality, is the first thing you should do with reality is accept the reality as it is before you make any movement, before you make any intention.
Before you worry about dying of something particularly, accept that you're dying, definitely.
You know what I mean? We're all dying, mate. We're all in the slow process of death.
It's like, wow, no, Iran and Israel bombing the tar out of each other. Oh no, like that could roll up 3 different scenarios where I'm sort of in the UK, kind of affected. My diesel might go up in price. Yeah, but you're going to die anyway. You're going to die.
And also,
anyway.
Everyone's going to forget you.
If you sit there and hide, or you are going to be forgot. It's
but
like
even if you're one of the most memorable people on the planet. Yeah. You're just going to be a name anyway. No one really cares about you.
They reckon you die twice. You die when you die, and then you die the last time someone says your name.
Or I think I heard it differently. You die the first time you die is when you realise you're going to die. You know what I mean? And then
the other one is when you understand what that is, like the dead goldfish or the dead bird on the road, and you're like, whoa.
Yes.
He didn't get up in the morning to sit there on the road all smushed up. And then you see it, if you've got a long enough, miserable enough life, you see that happen with people. You see bad things happen to people who didn't deserve it. And you say, fucking hell, even if I do the right thing and I do everything to my best effort, I can still get a bolt from the sky and it sweep my deck.
Someone made an AI, you know, the new Google AI that does video. Someone made one of those the other day, which was interviewing old people on their deathbeds.
Yeah, what are your regrets?
And so he said, what was your regret? And the guy said, I regretted not buying the S&P 500 at whatever or not. But it was all so ridiculous that it made you realise that it doesn't. None of this shit matters.
Well,
and all the things you worry about now won't matter in the future. So why do they matter now?
The answers people give on the deathbeds are actually very similar. It's and it's around, and actually talking about caution and privacy versus being too visible and being attacked and all of that. Most people's regret on their deathbed, if they've got a chance to answer the question, is that they didn't live a full enough life. They said no out of caution to things that they wish they'd have said yes. And think how many times you say no really in your life. There's quite a lot.
I know, and this compounding. Very small no's compound over time.
Equally.
Like when you think about the effect, you know, what they call the butterfly effect sometimes, you know, a very small no can lead to something in the future that never happens, which is phenomenally important.
Future versions of yourself by saying no. And you're creating future versions of yourself by saying yes. And life is a process of doing both. And the getting good at it is to saying yes to the things that are good for you and everyone around you, and saying no to the things that are bad for you and bad for everyone around you. Or
saying yes to the meaningful things, because they might not necessarily on face value appear good for you.
Which is why you go back to judging your mission as being achievable or not, maybe. Because then when you say yes to it, you're not saying yes with the certainty you can do it, like a jigsaw puzzle or a shit toy that you have to put together, like hobbies and easy, simple, self-fulfilling things. It's to put a peg out and say, I don't know if I'm going to hit that target.
I'm going to end now, mate, but I've got one more question. What's your mission?
Root mission is just to live to the maximum potential that I'm capable of. That's a good life, to live to the maximum capability of what I can do with my judgment. And do that in directions that are good for me, good for my life, and are good for people around me, by being someone who's responsible and capable, and people getting the benefit of that passively, and me getting the accolade of it actively, in going into volatile times, which we might be right or wrong about. It might just be like this and boring forever, but it doesn't change that I'd still need to reach a potential. And you can't abdicate challenges and get there. And you can't take on challenges that are beyond you and get there. And it is a constant, wild process of testing that in a chaos outside and coming back with the results and risking the scratches and risking the death blows to come back and learn more, get better, and go back out again and again and again until something gets me. That's what I want to do. So,
cheers, mate. Nice one. Thanks for that, and thanks for inviting me up here again.
You're all revved up again.
I'm all revved up and ready to go. I was already revved up when I got here, mate.
You were, mate. You were.
I'm revved at the moment because even simple things like I drove here over the mountains, and it's a sunny week this week, and people were waving to me, and I saw the headmaster drive past me, and we waved, and I just thought, yeah, right now I'm a complete anarchist. I'm just driving down the road doing whatever the fuck I want, you know, making all my own decisions. No one's telling me what to do, and the sun's shining, and life is good, and I love my kids, and I love, you know.
But what do you mean? You haven't got Radio 4 on listening to the Middle East war, worrying about it from 3 degrees away?
No, I was looking for Jeremy Vine's my pet peeve. If I want to incite violence, I just listen to Jeremy Vine.
You've got to understand that they're up there and popular for the same reason the politicians are. It's because a fucking lot of people love the music that guy makes, and it's part of the picture. It doesn't it shouldn't, if you're mentally healthy, change your outlook day to day. Good day out there, shit day out there. Hey, sun comes up, sun comes down. You've got time. You've no matter way worse than what we've got now. You can do stuff that you can be proud of, and you can do stuff that you can be ashamed of, and it's all still to play for. And whether the world's good, bad, what we think arrogantly we can guess is the very least of it. People that are good in bad situations aren't that because they've practiced necessarily. It's because they've served a purpose to get resilient to that and to get in the fight, get in and fight and risk losing. That's the most important part, not how you assess the situation before you go into it. That's sort of negotiating yourself out of it. It's coming, whatever's coming, and it could be a quiet world and a busy life, or it could be a quiet life and a busy world. Yeah. Anyway, we keep going around.
I think it'd be a busy world and a busy life. And for the record, I don't feel like a boomer, even if I am. I don't think I am, but
like I said, it's not something.
I can't wait to be a granddad. Put it that way, and I'm going to be a hands-on granddad. You know what I mean?
Right, mate, yeah.
Not. I think that's one of the symptoms I find of your dog's just frolicking in the grass over there.
It's not really.
One of the symptoms that is the most grating a little bit is when they're like hands-off grandparents, and because when you look at the traditional role of people, when they're young they did this, when they're middle they did this, and grandparenting was always an important role, which multi-generational families did.
It's a super important role, man.
Yeah, but I don't understand what keeps you going if you're not a grandparent, if I'm honest. Because I now, having had kids, I now realise that having kids is the most important thing you can do in your life, right? It trumps everything. So and that's after doing some really important things that I thought were really important in my life. So what am I going to do when I'm older? Garden? No, I'm going to be a grandparent. So I'm going to help out in simple ways. I'm going to offer as much wisdom as I can. I know that's these days grandparents often have less wisdom than younger people because it's all tech based now.
Well, so it's that generation. They never had, if they had a life with fewer challenges on average than most generations, they are the least best resource for advice.
What I mean is, like, you know, I don't know whether you know that, but I used to go to Mongolia every year and visit a family and go on a nomadic migration with them and stuff. Right. Anyway, but when I came to know their culture very, very well, and the old people were revered, but it was because they knew so much about herding and staying alive. And I think what's happened now in the current world we live in is the grandparents don't necessarily know a bunch of shit because the kids learn it at a very young age, and it's a lot of the time now the grandparents are asking the kids,
well, that's it.
Can you fix my thing? Can you do this? Can you do that? You know?
Experience isn't a function of time, right? Like, you can't just live in any situation and make any decision and call yourself experienced. Experience is success at the coalface, where it wasn't always sure. And young people can have a lot more wisdom than old people who haven't got the mileage. They're of a certain age, and then we say, oh, well, at 70, you must have been to war once, and you must have run a business once. And it's like, no. The whole generation had this room in the middle to have coasted through and live a life that was kind of artificially at the expense of other people who've either died or lived a lower life because of the confiscation. And their experiences aren't to be copied, because their experiences aren't ones that we're going to have. They've had a different life. They've done it on resources I'll never see, ever. So you take them with a grain of salt, and you stick to the people that are half failing, half winning at everything they set their mind to, because they're judging the challenges properly, and you'll get the advice you need off them, not the advice you want off grandmum. Which is, don't worry, it's all right. Oh, you haven't put on weight, you look lovely. And that's not what you want to hear. A comfort generation will give you comfort and advice. They won't make your life better.
Well, anyway, here's to a better life.
Harder life, harder.
Well, is it? Do I want a harder life? I'm a meaning guy. That's hard, so be it. But the most meaningful thing I have in my life is my children, and they are easy peasy to be around. You know, and it's the joy.
Only if you work at it, right? Like, if you had kids you had a distant relationship with, by now that's fractured and low trust, and that's hard. They become a liability to your feelings. Whenever you think about your kid and you never put any effort into your kid, you're gonna feel bad. But if you've put your effort into your kids and you've loved them and you've done your best, and you made mistakes, and that's someone that when you see them, your heart lights up because they're a subject of your proof of work. You're taking the bit of yourself that's going to die and taking that bit that you want to keep carrying on and teaching your kids and the grandkids about you so that that part of you keeps going on, because that's the part you want to keep and see in your grandkids. You won't teach them about all the shit that you're ashamed of.
Well, I mean, they do see that as well. That's the beauty of, kids, is you do realise, oh my God, that was bad parenting.
Yeah.
And as they're getting older, we talk about those things more.
Well,
it doesn't make sense to talk about them when they're too young, because you can confuse them.
That's your perspective if you've tried hard and you're honest, right? But if you haven't tried hard, you don't even know what bad parenting is because you're still doing it. Like, bad parents have done horrible stuff and won't apologise because they think they're right about it. That's hell. That is hell. You're doing the wrong thing and you think it's the right thing. That's the abyss. So you're in a position already where it's a good source of joy, isn't it? To know that you've put something in that's...
Well, I'll go back to the meaning of it. There's no better example of the pursuit of meaning over happiness than your children.
Yeah.
Because when I just said being around them is so easy, it is. But if I look back, there's such heartache and trouble that you suffer on account of them.
Yeah.
But actually, you don't. You ride it out because it's so meaningful. You just literally ride it.
It's like a kind of tax-deductible pain. Like, you're going through it, it still stings, whatever it is, whatever hardship. But if it's under a mission that you're loyal to, it's just the price you pay for getting what you want, right?
Yeah, you're right. It's the price you pay for meaning. It's the price of meaning.
Yeah, like, doing a hard thing you're not into is maybe the worst situation in between your ears. Like, as an experience to go through. You're doing something that is difficult and you're not into it. That is one of the hardest paths to walk. So the opposite is to do something that you really care about, to the point that you'd drown to get it, blow yourself up to get it, rip bits off yourself to get it, give kidneys, go to any trouble, anything, all in. And there's only one category, kids and a wife. I'm
not being funny, but kids can make not that I've done it, but I could make the drudgery of a terrible job be... Oh,
you can do more than that for your kids.
Meaningful.
Have you heard of this supernatural strength phenomenon? Like,
lifting cars and stuff. Yeah.
But it's not urban myth. It's verified. Like, women lift cars off their kids. You know this Eddie Hall, the deadlift weightlifter, the deadlift champion. He lifted a 500 kilo bar off the floor, right?
Was that the one who did it for his dead wife?
No. His wife's still alive, but it's linked to that because what he said, he was being interviewed after it, and this, by the way, he lifted up a 500 kilo bar, and then he had his nose exploded under the pressure, and a big blot of blood while he stood there staring everyone out. God. The blood just pops out of his face because the pressure, your blood pressure's at 200, and you're dying.
Jesus.
And he lifted it, and then after he lifted it and put it down, he was in hospital, like basically being treated as a stroke victim, like unconscious coma, I think, comatose or induced coma. It fucked him up. But he lifted up 500 kilos, and then after it, he's back to full health, I think. I don't think he'll be doing the bar again, but he's healthy again, he's talking, and he's fit. And the interviewer was saying, like, how do you lift a 500, like a typical interviewer question. And he had a very specific answer. He said, well, have you heard about these women that lift up cars and that? And he's like, yeah. He said, that's real. And he said, when I was doing the world record attempt, I couldn't get past 490, something in practice. But when I was over the bar, I wasn't breaking a world record. I was lifting it off my daughter. You see?
That takes a lot of visualization, though, doesn't it?
Well, you can get there. And he got there. And you bypass any limit, any physical limit. But what I mean, the point of it is that you can only access that when your identity is root believed. And only you're responsible for that. He couldn't have pretended, theoretically, a kid he hasn't had yet and rescue them, because you wouldn't pick it up past 250 kilos. If it is your kid, or whatever other thing that is absolutely what you'd die to do, no matter what that is, as long as you believe it, you will unlock your potential. He did it by lifting a heavy weight. That's a different level of effort than setting up a business or saying something that's difficult to someone who needs to hear it. They're different levels of effort. But these identity concepts are what you're loyal to, and that's what pushes you through these barriers. It's not motivation, and it's not good luck, and it's not a bit of extra money or an extra bit of encouragement. It's what you fucking think enough to take to the absolute. And that's why it's so important to define properly, because you either got it and it's in your pocket when you need it and you perform, or you haven't got it and that check bounces when it comes to the test. So it's that important.
Right, we've got to go, mate.
We
can't keep this thing going. That was a look at that. That was, well, that's 3 hours. Plus, I switched the thing off when I saw that thing flashing, and that was 25 minutes. So that's 3 hours, 25 minutes. I might have to split this into two.
You might. I don't know how you do it.
No, I've never done a two-parter, but this might be the perfect chance to do one. Ben, thanks, mate.
Thank you, mate.
It's always a pleasure. Look, here comes.
Well, you know, he's a clever dog, so he's seen the conversation and the noises.
Yeah, he's realising it's
like a phone call.
Yeah, it's coming back.
And now look. Bored off his pants.
Yeah, great to see you again.
Good to see you, mate.
Yeah, I don't even need to say good luck. It doesn't mean anything. I hope it carries on. It will carry on.
God bless type thing, isn't it? It's like fare thee well. And same to you.
I'm going to bring, some point in the summer holidays, I'm going to bring my kids up here so they can swim in your lake.
Get them up, mate.
Because we vowed last time we were up here that they were going to do that. And
well, we've done another podcast maybe, but there's been stuff on the site while I've been away that's been upgraded. It's more comfortable to stay. It will be something we can offer out, but not for now.
They'll want to camp, mate. That's what they do.
A bit of camping, a bit of cooking on the fire.
Yes. Right, great. Thank you, mate. See you next time.
See you next time.